Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me tonight, well, if I'm Yogi, then he's Boo Boo. And if he's Piglet, well, that makes me Pooh. So here's Brian.
Well, you know, Pooh is a bear, so apropos of the moment.
Although that sound effect might have been unbearable.
Bears are aggressive, but kind.
Well, and they do, certain things in the woods, I hear. See, it was linked to the bearness of it. I'm sorry, when I wrote the word poo, I hate the word when it means, take a crap, but a chance to use a sound effect, I couldn't resist. So, Brian, we are finally back. We basically skipped June. Oh, June has been quite the month for both of us. But luckily, as tumultuous as life can be, we do have TV to rescue us or to take us away, like Calgon in those old TV commercials. I was debating telling a really stupid story to begin this podcast, but part of me thinks there's something so blandly boring about it, and it lacks visuals, that maybe if I feel like it, I'll do it at the end of the podcast. And if I don't, kids, don't worry, you didn't miss anything. I haven't had enough to drink to say fuck it, and I'll do it now. But maybe by the end of the podcast, I'll do it.
I think you should be like the stand-up that goes in and tries to tank in front of other stand-ups because that's funny. And once you see the crowd sucks, then they tell like that they really bomb on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to Norm Macdonald this thing to death.
Yeah. Yeah. Norm Macdonald roast level.
Yeah, exactly. I love this. Probably 90% of people will watch that clip and not get the joke. And it's like, but the really smart people or the real comedians, they all get the joke of being that bad. So bad it's good. Speaking of so bad it's good, that really applies to this podcast most of the time. And we have finally made our way back to STVD Studios, or really the desktops in our respective homes, which are, 700 miles apart? Mm-hmm. Like I said, we did skip June. And you know what? It could have been even longer. But back on June 22nd, FX/Hulu, and by the way, I still am not clear on the whole. Is it that FX has a partnership with Hulu, so some of their programming just goes directly to Hulu, but it still has the FX brand? Is that what they're?
I think it's like my take on it is like game manufacturers that have like PlayStation exclusives, or Xbox exclusives. That there are programs that go to FX on Hulu.
Okay. Because, they have a few. Let's get to it. We're talking about how on June 22nd, they did drop the second season of The Bear. Now, The Bear, or as, people from Chicago refer to it, The Bear, was discussed to some extent last year. Now, Brian, you were not able to be on the Best of 2022 podcast, but I do recall that you sent your list to me, which I did share on the podcast. And you had season 1 of The Bear as your number 4 series of the year. Now, I actually had it at number 3. Basically, we both had it behind the final season of Better Call Saul and the first season of Severance. You just popped the second season of Reservation Dogs over it. I had those doggies down a little further down at number 5. So, very similar tops of our lists. And when I was looking at our respective lists, I started realizing just from the past few years, the most eclectic or interesting comedy series or dramedy series or whatever you want to call some of these shorter format television series, they all seem to come from the FX or FXX or whatever Hulu factory. I mean, you can say that, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia train started this whole like 18 years ago. But I'm thinking more of more recent things like the aforementioned Reservation Dogs, not to mention one of your favorites. I think it was high on your list, Atlanta, which came to an end last year. You know, What We Do in the Shadows, of course. Archer is still plugging around, for God's sake.
Right. It's sort of, for me, like the one I thought sort of kicked it off. It's Always Sunny is its own sort of thing. It's kind of like the Simpsons of live action.
Yes.
At this point. But I sort of think what sort of went this weird way was when they did Louis, which I don't even know if you could see now because of everything with Louis C.K.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think of that. Because you had Louis, and then you also had, is it Better Things, which was kind of the actress from that show. She went and did her own thing. Actually, I forgot, because of all the stuff that's happened with Louis C.K. over the years. I totally forgot about that. And I was a huge fan of both him and that show until, well, you know. So, yeah, and then, but now, the current shows now, The Bear, I feel it does have a definite kinship with shows like Atlanta and Reservation Dogs specifically. They kind of both fall, all three more often than not fall into that category of you question whether they should be called a comedy or not. But to differentiate from the other two, I think there's definite moments of drama on all three, be it teary or tense or whatever. But I don't think the other two tend to have quite as much of the breakneck intensity that a number of Bear episodes have had just in these past two seasons. It's kind of one of the things the show has become known for. And I'm not taking away from the quality of the other two by any stretch of the imagination. Between ourselves and every critic in America, they have received, accolades up the yin-yang. The thing with The Bear, for me at least, I guess I should only speak for myself, of course. I just feel The Bear just tends to pack just a bit more of a gut punch, compared to the other two. I might get emotionally affected by the others, especially Reservation Dogs, especially the last season. But, the Bear sometimes, especially this season, it feels like someone just literally ripped open my guts and just spilled them on the floor. I'm just staring at them like, oh, that's me. So it's no wonder that we're doing this podcast, because it regardless of the fact that this podcast is called Serious TV Drama, obviously many times we cover things which don't necessarily fall under that. But I think this show quite often does. It quite often is very serious. And I think quite often it's more of a drama than it is a comedy, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is with comedy sprinkled throughout, like a fine ingredient. It's
right.
A hint of saffron but yeah, I think it kind of dropped out of nowhere last year.
Right.
And because it did like the, full drop and surprisingly they did it again this year. It sort of came out of nowhere and wasn't as heralded, and it was really hard to tell what it was. And I think what all of us have talked about at various times is, we've seen shows set in a restaurant, we've seen people trying to make a business run, but I don't know there's ever been a show that goes behind the door of the restaurant and spends most of its time in the kitchen, and to basically take, like a 20 by, 20 space and make it like the sort of the main set of a show, with obviously not that being all of it, but that sort of being the centerpiece of a show, was a pretty bold move. But when they're in there, I think the way I describe this show is when they're in the kitchen, they're trying to make you feel the pressure of good service, of what it means to, be successful and run a restaurant and what that means. And all that's hidden from us outside the door. And, many of the shots in the show are going into the door and letting you behind the door to see what's happening. And it's been really, really effective and become one of my favorite shows.
Right. And it's interesting you should point that out, and I'll probably be repeating this in a moment or two. That was very much the feeling and focus of season one. And one of the really things that that, in my opinion, makes season 2 actually leap well past season 1. So opposite of sophomore slump, this show, I think, just blew season 1 out of the water, quite frankly. And I love season 1, clearly number 3 on my list, because they already knew they had, like, the kitchen stuff. They already got that in their back pocket. This season, they didn't need to do that, and they didn't. I mean, we certainly spend time in that and many kitchens, but it's kitchens around the world and just other places and other things. They really just expanded their universe and expanded the characters in a way that really built on season 1 in a really lovely way. So again, hence why we're doing the podcast.
Right. And I think the metaphor of the end of the season of we're going to completely do away with the restaurant we've spent the whole season in was a great metaphor to tell the viewer, like, season 2 is going to be different, but it's still going to be a restaurant. Like,
right.
So it sort of gave you the mental preparation that there were going to be some changes. And this whole season sort of built to what is the new restaurant and what does each character's journey have to be to make it a new restaurant and a better restaurant.
Right. And to remind any of the listeners who maybe the last time they saw season 1 was, last year, and maybe they didn't watch the recap. I'm assuming there was a recap of the season. Maybe there wasn't. Season 1 did leave off with a resolution to a plot point. Maybe a few questions. Most didn't. Whereas the money that Carmi's dearly departed brother Mikey had borrowed turns out to have been stashed away inside all these dozens of cans of tomato paste. And as you just referenced, Carmi makes that decision to close the beef and use this sauce fall of cash as seed money to open an all-new restaurant, which would then be called The Bear. So this new season, one of the things I love about the show is that I can attack it, not attack the show, tackle it is what I mean to say, not attack. Tackle it from both from the two major things I look for in every television series. Plot-wise, this is about the trials and tribulations of a family, both in the literal sense, as far as blood relations, as well as one would call maybe a work family, trying to open a new restaurant. And while we definitely get our fill of delicious food, we get liberated from that kitchen I had mentioned that we spent so much time zipping around back in season 1. We travel all around the city of Chicago. We travel all around the world to Copenhagen. We even travel back in time with a really, truly monumental flashback episode. But what makes this show exceptional, which puts it above which makes it a top tier show, Brian, you might say.
Yeah. I agree. It is.
No one's singing around a fireplace in this one. It was a character-centric season in so many ways. Yeah. And well beyond the stories of the obvious, like Carmi or even Sydney, although we did learn so much more about them. Richie has a hugely powerful story arc that elevates him not just as a character, but as a vital part both of this series and of the business on the show itself.
Right. I mean, Richie's always been family in spirit, but not really a member of the family. But by the end of this season, you get a sense that in the kitchen, like he is a part of the family now.
Yes, absolutely. And as you filter through the cast, we get to see other shadings and spend quality time with the likes of Marcus and Tina, even Sugar. Hell, even her, I guess he's her boyfriend, Pete. I don't think he's officially her fiance. I'm not clear on that. Even he gets a really major and unexpected moment to shine this season. But, and I warned you about this ahead of time, but before we get into any episode specifics, and Brian gets to weigh in even more here, I want to give an early shout out to someone on this series who I don't think gets remotely enough appreciation and flowers. And I don't mean anybody that I've already mentioned so far. And nor do I mean any of the special or surprise guest stars that all brought their A game to this series, because no one phones it in when they're appearing on The Bear, apparently. Now, I want to give recognition to an actor, a bit of character actor, TV and films, I'll say for about 35-ish years now. It's been around a bit. I'm not even going to bother listing all the series that he's been part of at one time or another. That could take up an entire podcast alone. He has shown up on at least a couple series that have been discussed on this podcast over the years. He can do comedy, can do drama, which is probably what made him a perfect fit for this series. And we were comically chatting about someone who could play you in a in a future TV show, Brian. He's someone else who might be able to play you. I mean, he might.
He might, if he could
might
grow a beard.
You already know where I'm going with this.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you picked up on it.
I'm going to guess, are you down with OPP?
Yeah, you got it. Because I am talking about Oliver Platt, who plays Uncle Jimmy, or Cicero. It's a pivotal role on this show. Number one, he's a key cog in the plot engine. He's the one who puts up the additional money to get the restaurant going, not to mention where that original money came from, while looming as the person who will take it all away and sell off the property if the venture fails. But he services the character building of so many others this season, be it Richie, be it Sugar, Carmy, of course, and other family members that we meet in a very special episode of The Bear. I just think he's stupendous. And while there is yet to be any character on the series that I don't find compelling and watchable, which is why this show I rank it as high as I do now, I think any and every scene that features Platt just automatically merits a gold star. It's like that star rating that Sydney dreams about for the restaurant. I mean, whether it's a turn of a phrase, a look on his face, I think it's some of his best work. And what's so great about it is that it always feels effortless, but it feels real. And many of the people on the show are people that we most, like myself, might not necessarily recognize from anything else. They might have appeared on a number of other things over the years, who knows? But most of the cast we don't actually know. Oliver Platt's a face we all know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter because it just, he seamlessly is that character. And I buy everything he does and everything he says. You know, it's different than it saying, like, I wouldn't compare it to say when you watch them where Christopher Walken shows up. Oh, it's Christopher Walken. It's guaranteed fun. It's because he is this character, and it's just so perfect for this show. I feel like he's a nice little linchpin so often. And he's interesting. There's even points in the show where, yes, he looms as a possibility of he can take everything away. But as he says in one very significant scene, he doesn't want to do that. He wants them to succeed. So it makes him a very unique character as well. I just wanted to give him a big shout out now. He'll be talked about in a couple episodes later as well, but I just wanted to say it from the top.
Well, I agree with you. And there are two main things I think about him. And I thought about him a lot last night because I rewatched episode 6 last night to prepare for the podcast. And it seems like after the death of their father, that he's sort of the glue of this family. Because all of them at various points in this season and even last season, like he's sort of the person they go to for the advice you'd go to if you had a healthy relationship with your father or mother. Right. And the other really cool thing I think about his character is it's never explicitly said, but it's heavily implied he's in waste management.
Yes.
That he never plays that in a way that I have seen played before. Right. He plays it in a very understated way. And to sort of bounce off what you said, I think the difference between Christopher Walken coming on and doing a walk-on role, like in Severance, and we love Severance, is like there's still always a Christopher Walken-ness to his performance.
Yes. Oliver
Platt is completely different in this than other stuff you've seen him in. That it's, you can't peg down an Oliver Platt center of gravity the way you can a Walken.
Right. I mean, just like for a show that we talked about on this podcast, think of him on Fargo and his character here. Night and day. So getting to the series itself. Now, just to be clear, my thinking of how we were going to approach this podcast, because I didn't want it to be one of our 18-hour marathon ones, just so the listeners are aware of this, we are not going to be going over all 10 episodes of the season. I mean, we could, but nah. Doesn't mean someone here might not mention things that happen in other episodes. there are significant things that happen in episodes that I'm not choosing to focus on. We could spend 5 minutes talking about Tina doing karaoke in that scene and how beautiful and brilliant that was. But you know what? Now I've mentioned it, so now I don't have to worry about it. And we'll probably wait till the end of the podcast if we feel like chiming in on what our favorite of the season has been. I do see in all the reactions on social media and so on, there's been a bit of a showdown for most viewers between 2 episodes of this show, both of which we will be discussing, of course. And those episodes happen to be back-to-back. And speaking of back-to-back, that's actually a pattern I noticed, and it's how I'm going to approach this discussion. I tended to pair up episodes. So we're actually going to be talking about 6 different episodes over the course of this podcast. And each of those pairs are lined up. Episodes 3 and 4, which were Sundae and Honeydew, 6 and 7, which of course are Fishes and Forks. Well, that's going to be fun for me to say. And finally, the final 2, which are Omelette and The Bear. So that's how we're going to approach this, and we'll do maybe some fun stuff towards the end of the podcast, but that, just so everyone knows what they have in store for them. I don't know if I'm going to bother doing chapters on this. I think I'm going to save myself the trouble, because if you're listening to the podcast, then you've watched the entire series. You don't need to go, wait, when do they talk about forks? Like, trust me, we're going to talk about it. Right. People with the forks, fork off. Anyway. Okay, so Brian, should I get started with episode 3, or is there anything else you want to hit us with the?
No, I'd just add to what you said, and that is that don't take the structure we've chosen as saying like you should skip any of the episodes. Oh, no. Like watch all 10. We're centering the discussion around like the emotional heft of the story and what we thought hit us the hardest. And while episode 1 and 2 and some of the other episodes didn't maybe land a blow, they sort of were the jabs that set up the right cross later in the season. So don't skip them.
No, of course not. And I am aware. I actually like the fact that I am not starting with the first episode of the season. I could have. I certainly, and some might say you should have. Nah, because everyone who's listening, you've already watched it. You're fine. We're bouncing over to episode 3. Episode 3, which, as I said, was Sundae. And let me note that episode was directed by Joanna Kahlo and co-written by Karen Joseph Adcock and Catherine Shetina. I think that's how her name is pronounced. I note that these are all women, which works even better once we get past the first couple scenes. This becomes a very Sydney-centric episode. But not that you should sleep on those two early scenes, because they give us some nice, even I would say important, character building moments, some of which pay off later on in the season. We start with Carmy in group therapy as he talks about trying to learn not to wait for that other shoe to drop, even though you and I and we all know it eventually will, and it certainly does. And we also get Richie dropping off his daughter at her mom's house. And this is us getting a chance to see his relationship with his really too cute, too funny for words daughter. But we get a nice sense of how he feels about her, his ex-wife, whom we will also be meeting later on in the series. But then we go to Sydney and Carmy experimenting with food, and then they make a decision to cleanse their palate by hitting other eating establishments for inspiration and so on. And Carmy subsequently decides to help his new, but not new, gal Claire with a major favor. From that point on, the focus of the episode shifts to Sydney. And what I want to say, and then I'm gonna bounce it over to you, Brian. One of the things I find fascinating about this episode and about the series in general at times, and why I really marvel at it, they don't necessarily adhere to what a. And when I use the word formulaic, I don't mean that as a negative, because 99% of the scripts you see for whatever you're watching follow a certain formula. It's just the nature of the structure. It's just how stories are told. This is an episode that breaks that. We have, we start off with, like a scene of Carmy, a scene of Richie, a scene of Carmy and Sydney, and then it pretty much also just becomes Sydney's episode from that point on until the very end. And that's kind of a very lopsided, strange format for an episode of any television show. But with this show, and when they do unconventional things like that, and it's going to be interesting because the two big episodes that get talked about are almost the opposite of one another in that sense, actually, which is probably why it's great to have them back to back that way. But I think the unconventionality of how they approach structure here in the fact that we're watching a show that feels feels like a dramedy with just bits of comedy sprinkled in like a seasoning, as you said, but it's in a shorter format. Although they can play with the format, it could be they had an episode in season 1 that was 20 minutes long. They have an episode this season which is over an hour long. Maybe it being a Hulu show. They have that liberty, and maybe that's why it's an FX Hulu show as opposed to just being on FX. Although I'm going to say it might be due to the use of one word, which gets used almost as much as on Succession on the show. It might be more. So I'll take a step back, and if you wanted to step in and talk about this one a little bit first.
I like when we get a little more Sydney, because I think the actor just has a wonderfully innocent, like, inviting face that looks open and curious and looks like, wide-eyed. And she's a good counterpoint to Carmi, who always looks, like put upon, frazzled, stressed. So I think, going with her and watching her enjoy food, but we introduced for the first time with her, like, the sense of frustration with him. And now she's not blowing her top, but she's clearly frustrated with him because they were supposed to go together and this was their thing to go. But she just goes out and does it and goes to all these places and tastes all these things. And I'll tell you, man, this show, like the food that it shows, I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like all the places she visits and showing the bites she takes and things she's trying. I mean, this show is a love letter to food. I mean, it really is. And I love watching her journey. And I'll sort of say sort of a performance that caught me off guard because I didn't realize it as we follow her throughout the season. Is I was kind of shocked about the second or third time I saw her dad. I didn't realize who it was. And finally it dawned on me. And here's another actor doing something that's, I don't want to say completely unexpected, because Robert Townsend's not a dummy, but I don't know that, that in my mind, I saw him as this older father looking out for his daughter and wanting what's best for her. And really their relationship is a nice thing throughout the series, wanting to be supportive, but afraid for her, and seeing as she's going on, she's starting to get worried. Am I making the right decision? Is this guy going to bail on me? Like, can he hack it or not? But I love her. I think much like Oliver Platt is sort of one of the, supporting characters maybe gets overlooked. I think as a lead actor, she doesn't get enough love.
Right. No, I would agree with that. It's interesting because when you were at the beginning of your spiel about her, referring to how she appears, and there's that, it's almost because she's very youthful in appearance, and there's almost a wide-eyed innocence quality to her, but everything she says undercuts that. Because that is not the way she talks, right. Which I find fascinating about her. It's what really, I mean, she can bring the snark perhaps more than anyone else, or has issues with people more than anyone else. But usually, and she can be right, she can be wrong. I adore her as a character, and the interactions and the relationship that we get to see with her father. And yeah, it took me at least an episode, when I think it was the second time that Robert Townsend appears, I was like, who is that? It's driving me crazy. And then I was like, wait a minute. And I did think, is that Robert Townsend? I haven't seen him. Then I looked him up, and I was like, oh, okay, that is him.
Yeah.
Why am I not just watching the end credits? Don't they? I'm just skipping to the next episode. That's why. Anyway.
Well, I'll just add, I'll bookend this because I don't think I said it the best. Everything I said that you played off of, I'm not taking any of that back. But I think that the important thing about her is she is the optimism. Like she is, and when that starts to crumble because she's excited and she's a believer and she's pouring herself into this, I think, she's sort of more optimistic. I think Carmi believes and he's just going to work hard to make it happen. But she's more sort of the dreamer optimist at this point, and that's a good person for him to have because
Right.
I think if you look at him and Michael, he probably was her to Michael.
Okay, I can see that. It is, at the same time, it's also important to note that between the two of them, if this fails, Carmi seems more likely to recover. She's questioning that she could go through this again because of, which is sad because she's even compared to Carmi, she's fairly young to feel that way. And she has that conversation with her father. I think it's in the preceding episode actually about the stresses of doing this and giving it your all and whether or not this is the thing or not. And she feels, shouldn't you approach everything that way, which is why we get a nice line towards the end of the season when the Robert Townsend does say, this is the thing. And I remember that was, there's a lot of lovely callbacks in the writing that knit storylines together really well, in a well done way, which doesn't feel, cheesy or sickeningly sweet. Bittersweet is more of this show, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, because as you mentioned, she's bouncing all around town, getting a taste of what seems like dozens of foods, but we also get a taste of what that industry is like and how she is regarded in the industry. Because all these people, the chefs and owners, whatever, they know her. They're familiar with her. They're having conversations with her. They are relating how risky a venture she might be entering into, especially with someone who might not be the most reliable partner. That's what she starts to worry and question. So I love that while we're seeing all this rich tapestry of people and foods, and it's really kind of, almost soothing to see, but it's that bittersweet nature where it's like, there's these little things just to remind you, like, oh, the risk here, the fact that he didn't show up, the fact that all these people have a bad story about a partner.
Right.
And quite frankly, I think most people know the riskiest business to ever try to open tends to be a restaurant. It's a hell of a thing to try to do and that's why I think the ending of the episode is so significant. And it's one of the reasons I know a lot of people were talking about this episode. They were talking about it a lot because of the food. They were talking about all the food you see her going around town. I personally kept thinking, even if she's taking a bite out of everything, I don't understand how she's keeping all that down. It's too much stuff. But the ending, it's about failure. It's that no matter, and then you think about what you've seen image-wise in this episode. And here's the thing. No matter how promising or good something might look, either from the outset or from the outside, it can still turn out to be positively wretched. And that's when we see how she's been inspired by the food that she sampled and tried. And then she tries to do something, she gets access to that kitchen. And we already know that she's an amazing chef from what we've seen from season 1 and yada, yada, yada. And then she does that. Someone else doing the show, someone else writing the show, she'd sample that thing and there would be a smile. The Bear don't play that way. She tries something, it's awful, and it ends with her head down because she failed. Because opening the whole restaurant business, it seems like it's worse than baseball because it seems like it's more about failure than it is success than anything else.
Yeah. Well, I think what a lot of the central thesis of The Bear is that cooking is sort of an alchemy. That it's not just like if you get the right ingredients, that makes it, that there's something to the alchemy of having a process that goes a certain way by certain artisans that do it in a different way, that they could have the exact same ingredients as you and I, but they make it, they transmute whatever it is into something incredible.
Right.
And the key to the greats, to getting your star or whatever, is discovering that alchemy.
Well, it's like, I think even Richie refers to her when he's talking to her father later in the season. She's a wizard, and that's what these true chefs are. They're wizards.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Exactly. So let us move to the next episode, episode 4, which was Honeydew, directed by Rami Youssef, who, yes, he's the star of that series, Rami. And I just realized when I was writing up the notes, I actually know him from a few episodes of Mr. Robot, actually. Mm-hmm. And this was written by Stacy, I'm going to mispronounce her name, I apologize to her, Osei Kufor, who actually kicked off her career just a couple years ago, ranging from the story editor for the entire season of Watchmen, and she's actually about to be, she is the screenwriter for the upcoming Blade movie. So a very interesting, quick, but brief, but brilliant little career she's building for herself here. So this is the episode where Marcus goes to Copenhagen, where thanks to Carmi's global connections, he gets to live on a boat and train at the side of one of the best chefs around, Chef Luca, who's winningly played by Will Poulter. Now, as I said, later we are going to be talking about what may or may not be the best episode of the season or the series, but I'm going to pause it right now. This episode is the most beautiful episode of the entire series. Everything about it feels like you're capturing a moment you just want to kind of hold on to forever. It's like a raindrop poised to fall off, a flower petal, or a shaft of sunlight hitting a spot in a room in a magical way. Everything from the gorgeous cinematography of Copenhagen, those dollops of green glistening food, even the dude that Marcus finds trapped under that fence. There seems to be like a heart-achingly gorgeous look and texture to everything we see in this episode. It's as if this entire episode was like one of those desserts that Marcus is learning how to craft. And, and in the midst of all this, we also will get that sweet and funny conversation he has via FaceTime with Sydney, which we don't know at the time is probably going to be a precursor for things going a little bit awry later this season.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed this episode, and I love that it gets a callback in a later episode when Carmi talks about his time in Copenhagen.
Yes.
And refers to an invisible cat living on a boat. And it's like you said, all the little shoelaces that it waits to tie together. And it does no laces left untied by many of the threads the writers put. But I love this. And I will say, this guest spot early in the season, the relationship Marcus and him develop. It's just two people in a basically empty kitchen. They don't show them serving customers.
Right.
There aren't people busting in and out of a kitchen. This is obviously like a very specialized craft that he's learning. And when the bear zeroes in to something like this, it can become something really beautiful and magical. And I thought Marcus is sort of like the people's champion. Like if you want to root for somebody,
yeah,
he's got the mom at home that you're worried about in the hospital, but he's got to do this thing to better himself. And, and he's reading books on desserts and trying new things in the restaurant. And, I was kind of surprised he got his own episode and thrilled by it.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought back to season 1, and unless my memory is deluding me right now, I think I felt Marcus was the most endearing of all the characters on the show. Because it's kind of like a little bit kind of like what you were saying about Sydney, I would apply to Marcus. There is a positivity about him, and an optimism and and a desire and eagerness to learn,
Yes.
which is so admirable. And in this episode, we find out more about his life, everything from his ailing mother to his background in school and the jobs he had. And when he talks about it, I mean, I can't speak for those who are of considerably higher classes than myself, but for folks like me, instantly relatable. I mean, the struggle, this guy was, serving up Big Macs at McDonald's and things of like that nature. And, we all had friends who also worked at McDonald's and stuff like that if we didn't do it ourselves. But going to what you were saying, the relationship that forms throughout this episode between himself and Chef Luca, who again played so perfectly by Will Poulter, and he's someone I've just gotten to recognize as of late. Obviously, I saw him in the recent Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I know folks know him from things like Dope Sick or The Underground Railroad. I had to look him up on IMDb to realize, wait, but I've seen him in other things like, oh, he's in Midsummer. That's what I remember him from. Oh, he's in that stupid Bandersnatch episode of Black Mirror. Okay, one strike, but it's not his fault. Okay. But one of the things I really like about this season, again, perhaps more so than the first season, unless I'm forgetting someone, and I might be, no one plays like a cliche. And there's so many cliched ways they could have went about his character, and they don't do it. They don't go there. They make it, so it ends up feeling more genuine and real than if they had gone that way. If he had been more of an obstacle and more ornery or something like that, more like a miniature Gordon. Was it Gordon Elliott? Is that the chef I'm thinking of? I probably got the name.
Gordon Ramsay.
Gordon Elliott. Was that? Oh, that was the other idiot. No, different line of work, but bigger idiot. But he's not that.
No.
When they're having the conversation about, when we find out his past and they had the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen conversation.
Yeah.
I really kind of like, I love them, Joe, even screwing with him, like, acting, who's that?
Right.
It's like, no, even people in the UK know who Michael Jordan is.
Right. Right. Well, but you see their relationship grow. And what I liked about the way Will Poulter played that Chef Luca, is like he really did want to teach him, and he might have been a little impatient or a little annoyed, but he was never abusive. Like he was a caring teacher, and the more their relationship grew, again, that sort of alchemy thing, like the more their relationship grew, like Marcus started getting it, and right. Marcus started, as opposed to the screaming and yelling or whatever. And by the time he leaves, it's like a part of you is like, just stay there, Marcus. Like, it's so gorgeous. Like,
and also what's great about what he says to him, and also let me get to it first, and then I'll say how admirable the writing is once again. At one point when Luke is talking to him, he makes it clear that the way you get better, you're gonna fuck up. It's gonna be fuck up after fuck up after fuck. You're gonna fuck up a lot. Right. That's what it's like. What I was saying with Sydney before about failure. You have to what is it? You have to stumble before you can walk or fall or whatever whatever the hell the thing is. Another cliche. I feel like Michael Caine should be saying it in my ear or something. But it's the acknowledgement as it's okay to make mistakes because it's expected you're going to make mistakes. But as we all know, you learn from mistakes, and that's how you get better. And we hear him saying that, and you realize this is a conversation at a certain point in the season that he had with Carmy. Yeah. That's what because Carmy said something similar to that during the course of this season as well. And as you mentioned, the callbacks, when we obviously you were referring to the flashback episode, which we're going to be talking about shortly. But, even in the subsequent episode, when Richie is walking down a corridor in like the best restaurant in Chicago or the world, and there's all these photos of famous chefs or so on, and one of them is Chef Luca and Carmy standing side by side with each other. And it's interesting. It's like you wonder at that point, wait, who was considered the bigger deal at that point in time. So, yeah, there's so much. It's an exceedingly charming episode. Again, we've watched some of those shows we mentioned earlier, even like Atlanta, for example. We'll have had episodes where they took a bit of a travel log like aspect, where they were like in Europe or something like that. And it's not like I was opposed to them doing that on a show like Atlanta, whatever, although we have our slight difference of opinion, I think, on that season, whatever. This felt right for this show. It just, like I said, it felt, just to wrap it up, this entire episode felt like you just created this lovely little confection. And there was no way I was going to do this podcast without talking about it. And the other thing I realized, like, oh, good. It's also an episode you don't have to talk about that much.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I thought you'd like it because there was an invisible cat that kept coming and you had to feed it, but like no one ever saw it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when I've had a cat sit for certain people who will eventually maybe listen to this podcast when they get to season 2. And when they have a cat that didn't really care for people or me, it's like, all right, not going to come out then. All right, I'll just do the water, food, I can come back. Oh, it's gone. Okay, I guess someone's doing it. All right. There's been a few creature taking care of situations I've had that have gone that way. Hey, less work on my part. It's fine by me. I was like, oh, unfortunately, you didn't do anything invisible in the kitty litter. So let's move on to what some may say is like the episode of the season. I'm not saying we say that. We'll see. And that episode is number 6, and that would be Fishes. The creator of the series himself, Christopher Storer, he directed this, and he co-wrote it with Joanna Kahlo, who I mentioned before, who did the Sydney-centric episode. This is an episode, family dysfunction at its finest and most disturbing. There's so much that happens in this episode. I'm not recapping. I'm not gonna go through chronological points of the episode. I love the setup of it. And by the way, I have no notes on this. I'm just going by. But it's an episode now that I've watched twice, so I think I don't even have to have a note to talk about it. I love the setup of the episode where, if I recall, it's Sugar and Michael speaking outside. Which, by the way, the minute we see it's beyond her hair, when we see it's Michael, okay, oh, this episode's taking place in the past, and then we see Carmy joins them, and then we're like, oh, here's the 3 actual siblings. So, and we're used to talking about shows with at least 3 siblings, if not more, and how screwed up things can be. We can talk about that as well later, maybe. I don't know. And then the fact that Richie even pops up and is like, yeah. He's ushered to go back in, which kind of feels like his relationship with them even now. It's like, oh, you just did this nice quick little representation of what this family unit was. And I don't think anyone, as we all sat down, especially those of us who chose to watch this within the first day or two, and fortunately we're not spoiled on anything, we didn't know quite what was going to be in store for us when they walked through that door. I mean, we knew, okay, it's going to be a family thing, so it's probably going to be fireworks and crap, whatever. But there's 2 things we didn't know. We didn't know we were going to get like one of the biggest, almost 2023 Love Boat style of level of guest stars, but on the level of acting more like the Wire than the Love Boat. And we didn't know it was going to be as, and I'm going to use this word a lot about this episode, it was going to be as raw as it was. So again, there's so much to go into here. So I myself, I'm not even sure where to start. So I'm gonna let you, if you want to talk about it for a moment or two, and I'll pick up on whatever point, and then we're gonna roam around this episode like a madcap camera, just when we want to focus on here and there.
Well, I give my first thought on it, and then I have a question to guide our discussion after that. My first thought was one of my best friends is a psychiatrist, and he's not watched The Bear. and he came into town recently, and I said, "Have you watched The Bear?" And he goes, "No, my wife has, but I've been busy." And I was like, "Well, we're hanging out." He comes in regularly to take care of his mom, who lives here, after his dad passed. And I said, "Well, why don't we watch it? Because I'm curious what you think of what's going on here." And we watched it, and we got done, and he said, "Yeah, mom's an alcoholic with a borderline personality." And like the kids are, the kids have lived in that environment. And I said, "Well, now if you watch the show, unlike a lot of shows, you could actually watch this episode, go watch the rest of the series. It doesn't spoil anything because it's a prequel, but actually would give you a lot of interesting insight to the characters." And that may be the spoiler, is that it, you have some answers that unlock things from the very beginning of the show. But it made me think this, like, that house, that this episode tells you Michael was the hero child. He became a chef. Carmi was his little brother and looked up to him. Carmi wanted to be like Michael and in many ways surpassed him. And you see why Sugar wants nothing to do with the cooking and, that side of it. You see that she's the caretaker, that trying to dump the alcohol, is the one always wanting to see if her mom's okay. And I think the scene you mentioned out front, like they talk to her specifically, don't ask her if she's okay. And that, of course, again, that's another shoelace tied at the end of the episode. And that's when all the shit hits the fan.
That's it. That's what's the phrase you've used it several times on the podcast. We joke about it sometimes. Was it Chekhov's gun or whoever's gun?
Yeah.
The okay thing done at the beginning. That's the seed point. Like, okay, we now know at some point, I'm assuming sometime in the third act, she's going to say it, and all hell is going to break loose. We didn't know going into it, like, okay, just how bad is this going to be? We didn't.
Yeah.
And then it goes, it's bad, and then gets even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I sort of had like this episode blew my mind when I watched it. And I noticed, like, I'd watched it before, but this was the episode people online were like, "Holy shit, episode 6 of The Bear."
Yep.
This was the one that many people, it blew their mind. So the first question I have for you, this was an amazing ensemble of people. What was your favorite casting at the party and why?
Interesting. I was set to contradict something you said, but I'll take your question first. Okay, I'll be, as you know, as people who follow, at the very least, I think our Facebook page know, because I think I posted on Facebook about a month or two ago. The one person who was in this episode that I already knew was going to be on this show this season at some point was Bob Odenkirk. And obviously, anyone who's listened to this podcast knows of our love and adoration, and especially mine, for Bob Odenkirk. That goes without saying. So having Odenkirk be on this episode in this series, that alone, that before getting to really truly answering your question, it was almost like a cheat there to have him, especially. And then when we see what he does. That you went and got Bob Odenkirk, and he goes out of his way to play a part where he's not the most likable guy. I love that choice. I love that casting for that. But Odenkirk is for me, it's too easy. It's too easy a pick because he should almost be disqualified from this podcast as far as our pick because it's too much bias.
This is the Olympics. We're throwing out the high score and the low score.
Yeah. So I'm eliminating him from the mix. Now, we could go with, obviously, the showiest one of them all. I don't even have to say who that is. That's clear. Dust off the mantle, guest starring, Emmy, whatever. You pretty much nail that one. You got some Oscar gold. Now you're going to have some Emmy gold. Very impressive. Well, look what Laurie Strode's pulled off now. Too bad you couldn't do a decent Halloween movie in the last 20 years. You know who I'm going to go with, and I'm going to tell you why. And you probably knew it.
I asked this question because I was curious if you would have the same answer as me.
I'm going to go with the person who Now, it's almost the opposite of the Oliver Platt thing in a way, because I kept thinking, you know, I don't know if he wrote any of his own dialogue. He probably
John Mulaney.
didn't. But oh my God, everything written for John Mulaney, especially not so much the big saying grace scene with him later on, which I love that scene, but two other scenes. The scene when he's talking to the fax.
Oh, yeah.
And he actually says something along the lines, okay, this is it. I'm sorry. If he didn't write the line, then they wrote it knowing, okay, it's John Mulaney. This is a John Mulaney line. Do I have access to $500? Yes, I absolutely do. I'm a 43-year-old man.
Yeah.
Love that. And then when he insists on just, I don't care what you do. Just please give me weekly updates. I just like seeing you guys every year. You fucking deliver, because he's so amused by the ridiculousness of them, and the fact he also does the same kind of thing to his gal pal cousin Michelle, played by Sarah Paulson, who I love that it's 25 minutes into the episode before we see. Wait, Sarah Paulson? Holy crap! That's a name too. When he's questioning the story she's telling about the woman who's an asshole, it's like, because he's probably like, kind of sounds like you're the asshole.
Right.
It's something about his delivery and the way he presents it, and the fact he brings up a couple times that people think he's gay or not.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've gotten that myself over the years. And his is also the most unexpected, because, okay, everyone else, they're at this point, they're seasoned veterans, whether it be TV veterans or Jamie Lee, who's, more movies than TV, but whatever. And I know he's done his share of comedic acting, but nothing really dramatic that I know of. And if he has done something, I'm not recalling it. But that was the one I went, wait, John Mulaney's in this? And what made it really interesting to me, and the interesting thing about casting John Mulaney, is that a lot of what's going on in this episode, it's about someone, well, at least one character, who's dealing with, a form of an addiction issue.
Right.
And as people who might have been following John Mulaney's life for the last couple of years, he's had some of those issues himself. If anyone has seen his most recent comedy special, where then the entire thing is about that, by the way, and he talks just about his intervention alone, which, by the way, if there was ever an intervention that needed to be caught on video somewhere, and that's the one I want to see. I just thought it was such a great little piece of casting. Mulaney's my favorite bit of casting in the episode. Absolutely.
I loved him because he seemed to be like a person who was genuinely happy to be there, and was like sort of sweet and uncorrupted, and like you said, he loved the effects. He thought they were funny. Like, he appreciated like being there with his girlfriend. And I thought there was the touching moment where he said, I don't have a family like this, and you welcome me into your home. Like,
yes, right.
There was a lot of his story told, with an economy of words. And I thought he was very surprising, and I really appreciated him, because I'll be honest with you, with the talent on board, I thought he would disappear. Like, I did not think he would, it's hard to hold your own against the cast that showed up.
Right.
So
you're absolutely right about that. Going to something you mentioned, and then I'm going to go into a scene, which is not a scene people would expect us, or me at least, to focus on, but it is the first scene I'm going to focus on. I don't necessarily disagree that let me put it this way. Yes, one can just watch this episode as a standalone, just as like, this is an amazing hour of television. You should watch this. So yes, and I think we're both aware of a mutual, I don't know what we call that person, internet acquaintance who did that. My problem with that is, it's kind of like and you actually said it to a certain extent, that this episode gives you the insight or explanation to some degree, or the background or backstory or exposition, whatever, for so many things you'll see in other episodes, either before or after. But to me, I think it ends up taking. I'm really talking about the ones that come after, really, maybe, but even before, I think doing that kind of takes away from it. And that's why I wouldn't recommend someone do that. I was someone who they said we were going to do it. I was against it. You know, it is not really, it's not a great comparison. So, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's this podcast. So it's the natural one for this podcast. It's like people who think they should watch Better Call Saul before they watch Breaking Bad. And I'm like, no, don't do that. It works better if you've watched Breaking Bad first. Oh, but it's a prequel. No. But the way they've constructed the story, things are in an order for a reason. Watch Breaking Bad. If you're going to watch them, then watch Breaking Bad first. That's just my opinion. Again, it's not wrong. It's like that show that came out earlier this year with the different colors, and you can watch them in whatever order, and people chose to watch them like in a purely chronological way. It's like, yeah, you could do that, but it's just less interesting that way.
Right.
You know, if I'm watching Mad Men and it's going to take like a season or two before we really get the full lowdown on Don Draper, you know, and his whole back history. Well, I don't want that up front. I want the pieces to find out and everything. It works that way.
All right.
So the scene I'm going to go to, and again, it's not a scene anyone would probably expect me to go to. I'm going to go to the scene between Richie and his wife, Tiffany, when they're upstairs. And this scene is like one of the reasons I don't feel you do something. I wrote really mean notes. I'm going to skip what I wrote. I wrote something singularly stupid, like a mutual and watch this episode. But no, I will skip that. That scene, why that scene hits totally differently. If this is the first episode you're ever watching, oh, it's a sweet scene. If you're watching it the way it's meant to have been watched, it's achingly sad. It's a sad scene because of what it really represents. Because if you haven't seen it, because, you know, like earlier this season when Richie and his kid doing the tongue thing, or the way he refers to his wife, and what kind of man Richie has been until the metamorphosis we're going to see in the very episode that comes after this. It makes this scene, that's why I think the scene is so significant. And that's why I wouldn't want this to be the first time I've seen Richie in an episode and whatever, even though he has so many great moments in this episode. But I think it works better because it's plopped here in the middle of season 2. And the way it makes us reflect back, and then as we move forward, it makes the episodes that come after just that much more powerful as far as the Richie stuff is concerned, where he's come from. I mean, the chocolate banana doesn't work so well later on because of this episode. And that's right. Well, that's a little pornographic. Sorry, guys. Anyway, but I really love the scene. And it also, speaking of guest stars that we might not have given as much kudos to as others because, you know, maybe they're not on the same level, blah, blah, blah. But Jillian Jacobs is really kind of wonderful in this episode, and she appears briefly in a couple others as well. And, you know, we know her from Community more than anything else. I know she's done other things, but for us, she'll always be, you know, from Community. But there's a certain way she speaks and the way and it made her like just so believable. It's like, oh, yeah, it's a Chicago girl, you know, from the neighborhood. Yeah, I'm getting you know, the way she talks to him, like, you know, he's afraid that he's crushing her, the way he's leaning on. It's like, no, I like it. You know, it's those little touches, which again, I'm aware they are written for her and whatever, so brilliant. But she fleshes out those little teeny tiny moments so beautifully. Especially in an episode like this, where so much of the episode is not very sweet.
Right. Well,
it's a really
this is
nice
the
moment.
Respite in the episode to give you a break.
Yeah,
like
it's like a glass.
like this.
It's like a glass of fresh Sprite that someone somehow made. Which I was like, wait a minute. Did they have a Soda Smart back then? Because how did he carbonate it? Did he just mix something with seltzer? Is that it? Oh, big deal. Would you put lime and sugar in a seltzer? Oh, you're big deal. I could do that. Anyway, come on. Sorry.
The beauty I thought of this scene was watching Richie throughout the show. You assume like they split up because he's kind of an asshole. And you see in this scene, like they actually had a really good relationship, and he really loved her and was trying to get a job and trying to support her, and like all your assumptions based on him throughout this. He's hard to get along with at the store. He's he wants to boss in. He wants like this completely shifts your perspective on how they ended. That it probably wasn't what you thought. That it maybe was, he couldn't get the apartment in the nice school district, or, everything he tried to do was fail, or he stayed at the beef and that couldn't support them enough. It changes what you think of them, which then makes, his relationship with his daughter and where that goes even more powerful as well.
Right. It's interesting that we now have 2 seasons of this show, and we've gotten, and one of the things I think is remarkable is that we've gotten so much story and backstory and knowledge about these characters, but there are still major things that we don't know that are still waiting to be revealed. And the show never presents anything like, ooh, that's a mystery we're keeping to ourselves, and eventually you'll find out. It doesn't play that way. Like so many other, and great shows. I'm not talking about like bad shows, like the aforementioned, Don Draper on Mad Men, like the mystery of Don Draper how long it took us to find, this detail after this detail, whatever. Again, I might be forgetting something from season 1 because I didn't rewatch season 1, but I'm pretty sure about this. Do we know the story about the Pizzado's dad? I don't think I do.
I mean, if I do, I don't recall it. And I
don't think we know the story about it because I feel if we did, it would have been referenced again. And it's not referenced in this episode or at any point in the season. The closest thing to it is when he looks at that painting that he despises later in the season, and the words mother and father are written in the corner, and they zero in on that. And so I kept thinking, okay, if it was just about the mother, they would just have the word mother there. Mother, father is there. And that's when I realized we don't know the story about the father. And again, with Richie, we don't know what happened. I shouldn't say I'd like to think, I suspect that Carmy and that family were not the only ones that were so adversely impacted by Michael's death. I think it hit Richie too, and that might have had some sort of domino effect that ended up, screwing up his marriage, whatever. I don't know. They haven't told us how long they've been apart for. I haven't heard them say that. So
I agree with that, and I think to bounce off what you said, there's the scene where they're telling Carmy they'd seen Claire, that she was back in town, and you see Richie and Michael are like a duo,
exactly.
They're Richie's not as much on the outside as you see him later, and you almost suspect if Michael hid everything from Richie and it hurt him so bad that to think that he should have saved him or whatever, and that made him start using drugs and whatever happened. But you see, like Richie is closer. I mean, he's still, at the beginning, like get back in the house, which is, kind of funny. But you see, like there's a camaraderie with him and Michael.
Right. I mean, it's probably not lost on us that we know that Carmy has been gone. Like he's disappeared for like a year at a time, whatever. Well, perhaps it's very likely Richie has become such a part of this family. He's kind of become like, he's filled in the space. He's become the brother that Carmy's not there to be. And that might be how he views his own, that is, I believe, how he views his own relationship with Mikey, that they are essentially brothers without the DNA in common. Even though Richie might have his thing for his mom, who knows, who wouldn't. But back in the day, it was Jamie Lee Curtis. Maybe not in this episode, but, when they were kids, maybe. Yeah, and it's funny. I'm not focusing on her just yet because that's a thing unto itself. we certainly can at any point. What? I brought her up. Why not just go for it? Jamie Lee Curtis, who already kind of impressed the hell out of us with her turn in, what is it? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, whatever. And you mentioned watching the episode with your friend who was the psychiatrist. I always get the psych things confused. Yeah. It's interesting to note that everyone in that family, the Brazzado family, has some form of a problem, some form of there's an issue there. Not just, and not simply like, oh, they talk too much. No, there's a certain underlying psychological issue to some extent or another. I mean, of the four, the one maybe the least is maybe Sugar. It's how she's impacted, by her mom in that situation. And again, it makes me wonder about what happened with the dad, whatever. But certainly Michael, certainly Carmy, and wow, it's the mom. And you realize how much that, and you can tell and that's what's great about the performance is there's such a lived in nature to it that you realize this is someone who's been like this for years. And obviously it gets worse when it's such a huge family function and all this is going on for days. I mean, God knows what Thanksgiving is like in that house. But even on, just a random Tuesday in April, tell me the Feast of the Seven Fishes in April. I'm sure it's not. She's probably not much different than that. And it's scary. It's a scary performance because there is an off-kilter nature to it that she's constantly spinning. She's constantly spinning. And every time that buzzer goes off, it triggers her, and it's a new thing. And she has issues of guilt. Again, I think there's something with the dad story that we don't know, which is playing a part there, which makes me very curious. And she's got some classic Italian mother stuff, which is not that much different than the classic Jewish mother stuff, where she doesn't just feel guilty; she needs to guilt others. She has to. So there's a martyr complex where she feels like she's not appreciated, that she's not loved. But maybe I don't want to go too stereotypical with DNA stuff, although I got my DNA results this week. Anyway, I'm 2% Italian. Holy shit. Anyway, my mother lied to me my whole life. Anyway, there's an aggression there, and that's what makes it. So she's not someone who just, goes inward and just curls up into a fetal ball necessarily. She lashes out. And it makes her scary. It makes her dangerous. You understand why Sugar is so petrified and worried and feels she has to do something to rein her in. And she can't help herself. Because the natural instinct, it's like, hey, are you okay? Except more so than a buzzer going off, that's the trigger for her mom.
Right.
And you're just, it's the ticking time bomb in the episode is when's Sugar going to say it? Cause when she says it, that I was expecting, tables to be overturned, 7 fishes up against the wall. You're waiting for it. Jamie Lee is like, and the fact she's doing all this and smoking like a chimney the whole time is not, and this isn't 1972. This is supposed to be 5 years ago. 256 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, before the opening.
Which told, I did math. 5 years. So the fact that she's like smoking like a storm while she's cooking at the dinner table, whatever. It's like, wow, that's people doing that. It's like 16, 17. Wow. She's a dynamo in this. And for anyone who's had issues especially with their parents, or mother, whatever, in different forms. I've had them to some extent. I know other people have as well. There's a sad way we relate to it, and it made me flinch. I mean, my mother was never like this. I didn't have this kind of an issue, but I had other kind of issues, and I know other people did as well. So there's that kind of thing. Like it's a reminder that how powerful and how strong a figure the mother is in a household, and she is the matriarch of this family because and she is feared, and because they keep thinking it's like they all know something like this is going to happen, and they're just waiting for it. They even joke. They joke about it during the episode.
Oliver Platt. I mean, he says, hang on, I think stuff's about to get dark.
Yeah. So
His great lines at the table. Like I think he says that to Gillian Jacobs' character, like at the dinner table when they're sitting. I mean, they all know what's coming. Like, and the hope is like what you see is like the kids that have stayed there because of her, because like she's made them codependent to have to take care of her and tell her food's beautiful and all that. But what you really learn is that's why her kids cook. Like the way that you communicate love for people is you make beautiful food or you cook them stuff. And, what I think it teaches us, I mean, about Sugar is why she's not interested in the business and why she's looking for her man is very different than anyone else at that party.
Right.
Like
right.
he's a sweet doofus.
Yes, exactly.
And like that, but I love the touch when, she's been berated and she walks out and she just asks John Mulaney's character if he'd give her a hug. Like, there's an absence of warmth there.
Right.
It's like duty. You didn't come home. We had to beg you. Like it's all about duty. There's no warmth or love. It's these things. And I think what it tells us about Carmy is once you serve the food, don't attach that to love or anything else. Like because his mom was tied up in the idea that you prove your love for people, you do all this for them, and you expect them to give all this stuff to you. He separates himself from that. For him, it's just about the food. And I think that's where his relationship later with his girl gets into trouble. It's like now he's sort of combined two worlds, and he starts to have that epiphany after he gets locked in. What's he done? He's taken her out something to eat. And she does what no one else does. Like, oh, well, that was wonderful. Like he's sort of crossed those two streams, of the personal and the food. And then when he gets frustrated, he realizes he's sort of broken that rule. That I think that's his control to not be like his mom.
Right. Interesting. Speaking of the mom, there's a moment. Fairly.
Can I say something before I forget? I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Wait, you're thinking I meant to say this too, and I want to give major props to Jamie Lee, because I don't know that I've ever seen an actress who like just basically said, even in a portrayal like this, like don't hide my age lines.
Oh yeah.
Like she really let like herself look haggard, ragged. They didn't put on the extra makeup. Like, I mean, it's kind of cliche to say this, but I thought it was a really brave performance.
I like that weird little eyelash that stays on her cheek for so long. It drives you crazy. I thought that was very interesting. So there's a moment, I'm not sure when it happens. Let's say maybe roughly a third into the episode, not sure when. It's between her and Odenkirk's Uncle Lee. And he's talking to her about some deal he's made for a building. But in this scene, it's clear that there's some sort of history here, recent history between these two. And that's also when you see Mikey react, annoyed and kind of negatively about it. He says something along the lines of, not this again, whatever. I'm only saying, the reason I'm pointing out is because it's something I think that many, whatever, might have missed when they went over this episode, because that is actually, I think, to a certain extent, the opening salvo between Uncle Lee and Mikey. This was well before Lee interrupts Mikey's story that he's heard a million times, whatever. It starts here. And it also maybe fills in a blank without being expressly doing so, about why there would be animosity, why Mikey would have animosity to Uncle Lee, and maybe that was that thing that existed, hence why he would jump in on that story and shit on it the way he does later on.
Well, that's what's funny is the whole episode they play a game of not this again.
Right, exactly. Now, as we were saying, it's lovely that you have this. Every guest star has at least one or more moments to shine in this episode. Obviously, Jamie Lee with her multiple breakdowns, Odenkirk with his confrontations with Mikey, Mulaney with everything we said before. Even Sarah Paulson, when she's, she seems to be the one person looking out for Carmi's clearly fragile psyche. But let's go to someone who has been on the show before, but he's only had a few appearances, but he might be the most important guest appearance whenever he shows up. It's Jon Bernthal. It's Mikey. How good is he in that scene with Carmi and his reaction after? And then you realize just way before the fork scene happens, and it's like, oh, and the pit in your stomach of knowing where this character is going. Again, why I wouldn't say watch this episode before all the others, because, it's a bit more important. Oh, by the way, this is the one who kills himself. But when you see how he acts, and I wasn't that impressed with him as some might have been with The Walking Dead, but what he did on that HBO show that we both liked last year, We Own the City. And a few other things he's done, which I've heard are really exceptional. And his work, limited appearances though they may be, every time he's on, in this episode specifically, holy cow. I don't know. I think it was because he's only in, wait, is this the only episode he's? Yeah, I think so, right? It's the only flashback episode. It's the only episode he appears in also. So he would also fall under the guest star thing, whatever. How do you pick the guest stars in this episode to give it out, because Mulaney kind of deserves something too. It's the episode overall. And again, this isn't me wrapping up, so don't worry, unless we want to. It's visceral. It's nerve-fraying. It's stomach-churning. And specifically the last 15 minutes or so. And I know I made kind of a slight reference to it before as a joke, but it is eerily reminiscent of some of those really top-notch Succession episodes of the final season that we've talked about on the podcast. Those episodes that were essentially in one location, maybe multiple rooms, it's still essentially one location, and you saw the savagery of family dysfunction tempered by very dark or absurd humor, which makes it palatable until that too is kind of stripped away, and then it's just raw. And, in a show that deals so much with cooking, it's interesting that its most searing moments are actually quite raw. And yes, every single pun there was intended. So fuck it.
The savagery of this episode, this was like taking the like three siblings walk into the conference room during the board vote and stretching it out and about 2 or 3 times longer. And letting it simmer and boil till it blows up amongst all the characters. And there's lots of nice little touches in this episode. I thought one, Lee also calls out Mikey for using. And if you notice, early in the episode, Mikey's pretty clear-headed. But after the thing with Carmi, he walks outside.
Yeah.
And you don't see him use. You don't see him use, but he comes back in and he's different.
Yep, you're right.
And a nice little touch that's not obvious, but you see his character change ever so slightly to be more aggressive, less inhibited. And the scene, you can't go wrong if your favorite thing was the fork. It's funny that the next episode's called, what it's called?
It's not
because,
a coincidence.
Yeah. But I love, we were talking about Mulaney. I love when he was doing the prayer and it says he's still holding the fork.
Still holding the fork.
And they're all like, yeah, he is. It's
amazing.
Like an amazing bit of dark comedy, to break the tension.
Yeah.
But Bernthal, to me, watching this was like a sort of like almost Gandolfini-esque performance, he was just a powerhouse on the screen, man. And in a room full of people, before the mom shows up, he's the one they're all afraid of.
Right.
Now.
Also, it's funny how we gave the man so many raves at the top of the episode without really talking about his performance in the episode. So my way of closing the episode, at least, or attempt to close the episode, will be to acknowledge, yes, that the actual fork showdown, what Odenkirk does in this episode. Hey, you know what? We watched Better Call Saul, and we saw him do dramatic work. We feel we feel he's due at least one, if not more, Emmys that he didn't get. But his face off with Mikey here, and I hate to reuse the word, but I don't have my thesaurus handy, so I'll just have to reuse the word. The savagery of his rebuke of him and laying out everything about every negative aspect of what Mikey is at this point, and the fact that it all has the stink of truth about it, and even though people are trying to get him to shut up, well, he's provoked and he's already shown himself. Again, these two have issues from the get-go, and it festers and gets worse. And yes, is Uncle Lee responsible for a lot of that? He didn't need to step into that story. He didn't need whatever. Of course not. But that's the dynamic these two have. I don't doubt that there's been issues between them at previous 7 fish feasts before. But the fork thing, and then when he asks each person, are you using it? And everything from that to that closing shot where you realize, the fork is in the cannoli thing, which also makes the thing later, not just the next episode being forks, but the thing with the cannoli thing later on and being called the Mikey kind of really almost beautifully eerie, I guess. It's a fantastic episode of television.
It really is, and by the time it's over, you're tired.
Oh yeah, it wears you down. But I'll say this before I move on to the next episode. Although you appeared once, twice, don't remember how many times, a couple times. I did that countdown a couple years ago on this podcast of the 20 greatest TV episodes of all time. One per show, blah, blah, blah. If I was to say, I don't know look, I highly doubt I'll be doing this podcast 5 years from now. But I guess I don't know who knows if I'll even be alive 5 years from now. But if both those things should be the case, this has a shot at cracking that list. Especially because it functions as not a standalone in the sense of, it's like episodic television, but as just a piece of holy moly, this is wow. Yeah. So see,
there are two things that broke the zeitgeist this year. That this and the episode of Succession, right, where they pull the carpet out from under you.
Right.
That the kind of thing that if you're watching a show like this that you're really invested in, you can't really wait 3 or 4 days if you're onto any sort of social media because you'll be spoiled. But this. You saw it multiple places, I'm sure, like I did. People I didn't even know watched this show were like, holy shit, did you see episode 6 of The Bear?
I rarely tweet a reaction about any TV show I watch, and even the shows I love. I did that tweet for the show. I think it was something like, episode 6, fishes. But I write holy fuck or holy shit. I don't remember. Probably, I don't like the phrase holy shit very much, so probably holy fuck.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, all that said, I guess it's not going to be an hour and a half podcast after all. Let's move to episode 7. The counterpoint to this episode, Forks, which was also directed by the creator, Chris Storer. This one was written by Alex Russell. It's the Richie episode, Ebon Moss Backrack. Before I get into any specifics, let me just say it here. This episode, it's the perfect episode to follow fishes. It's like I just referred to it as like a counterpoint. And it also makes it interesting that these are the two episodes that most people are going back and forth, which is they think is the best episode of the season or of the series, whatever. there's no wrong answer per se, but it's interesting. Like the previous one has this weird kinetic frenzied. It's almost as frenzied as that crazy episode from season 1 with the almost the real time kitchen episode where it's like, oh my god. This might not have that kind of quite that pace. It almost feels like it because it's relentless. It's like a Robert Altman movie, but on cocaine, and Tarantino decided to throw some violence in there, and do some rewriting on it. Whereas, Forks, I mentioned about formulaic, right? Forks is it's a one-man show kind of a thing. It's an interesting episode that we have not one, but 2 different episodes. If I'm missing another one, I apologize. Because Sydney, I guess you could say the Sydney one's sort of, I don't feel quite that way about that episode. It becomes Sydney-centric, but I don't know, and it's a Sydney episode, but not the way the Marcus one is for Copenhagen, Honeydew rather, and not the way this one is. This is a Richie episode. We spend the episode with Richie. Our only interaction with anyone else is through him, be it on the phone or whatever. And I love it's the way they build the episode, and even though you can kind of see where it's going, you see where this is going to, how this is going to land. It's executed so flawlessly. I know there's like people who probably watch the show who are also watch a show like Ted Lasso. And a lot of reasons I think people are big fans of a show like Ted Lasso is, even though there can be sad poignancy moments here and there, quite often there's a feeling of satisfaction by the end of the episode, because there's something, even if there's bitterness or sadness here, it still ends on a positive note. There's something uplifting about it. And this is an episode that actually has that, as opposed to the Sydney episode we talked about earlier, where it ends with her failing, as opposed to, and it may be the exact opposite of the episode that we had just watched before it, with fishes, where it's about this crazed ensemble of people and who are swimming in this world of chaos. And by the end of it, let's just to be clear, no one's happy at the end of Fishes. Forks is a one-man show pretty much, although the ensemble around him are all lovely and fun, and we get another great special guest appearance in this one as well. But it ends on probably the most positive note of any episode I can recall. And by the time this episode is done, if you weren't the biggest fan of Richie, his character, whatever, this is such a great payoff for him, for everything we've seen him go through. Whether it be the very episode beforehand, with what we saw him early on, when we go from that to him being being in touch with his wife in this one, I think it's in this one, right?
Yeah.
It's such a nice companion piece. That's what's going on. All these episodes, there's a kind of a nice, interesting pairing with them. But this is the most deliberate for a reason. It cleanses, much like Sydney needed to cleanse her palate, and then Carmi was supposed to. I guess he never did. This cleanses the palate of the jaw-dropping bitterness of the previous episode, and I think, in some ways, that might be why some people prefer this episode, because no, that episode left me numb. This episode left me kind of humming, maybe. I don't know, or just feeling good. I'll stop. I'll let you talk.
No, I think you're dead on. I think that I'm positing this and not saying it's right or wrong. Either approach is right or wrong. I would bet if this show dropped weekly rather than streaming, that 6 would probably have more supporters. But I think if you go from 6 directly to 7, if you're streaming it and binging it the way a lot of people did, I think there is a very comforting feeling that 7 brings you back down, and it drops your anxiety. It's quieter. I mean, when I rewatch 6, God, that's a loud episode. And the background sounds, you hear the kitchen. I mean, there's no episode that's quiet other than in the bedroom. And even then you faintly hear stuff going on.
Right.
This is an episode that it's quiet. It's proper. And I mean, I think probably another reason that this episode has a lot of supporters is we have another wonderful guest star in this episode, that there's that moment with Olivia Colman that came out of nowhere, and I watched it, and for like 10 seconds I was like, is that really Olivia Colman just doing like a walk-on cameo in The Bear? And sure enough it was, talking about mushrooms. And the metaphor of you got to do the small things right, that it starts there to get to something. And you see Richie do the small things that through the episode he gets up on time. And you know, by the end of the episode, he's hopping up right before the alarm clock. And, you know, it's just really well done. And you see him metamorphosize to become what the bear needs, because then we do see Sydney fail and he's there to step in later.
Right.
And, you know, when Carmi's locked up and Sydney fails, you know, the least likely person to be voted, maybe the MVP of season 2 would have been Richie.
Right.
And he's possibly the MVP of the season.
Yeah. It was funny when Olivia Colman, I almost wish she hadn't been on Secret Invasion, that Disney show it's on now, because I feel that would make her appearance on The Bear that much more special and noteworthy. But yeah, just to reiterate, just the back-to-back episodes, you know, I think like Fish's leaves us kind of shell-shocked and gobsmacked, but Forks is life-affirming. So it's like it's like a warm blanket to drape over a viewer who's shivering after watching Fish's, quite frankly. Right. Now, the stuff with Richie, which was great about it, it's such a great exploration of him as a character, because he's someone who's cocky but lacks confidence. He's someone who doesn't know, at this point, he doesn't know his place in life, be it at the restaurant, his extended family, but not by blood, with his ex, the daughter. He's kind of adrift. And it's especially poignant, especially when you saw the aspirations and goals he had in the flashback episode, Fishes, just before that. But here, up until this episode, we haven't seen little to none of that. And it's like what you're saying, it's like it changes our view of him, because he changes his view. He changes his view of the business, of how people treat people in the business, whatever. I love the thing that Coleman says, like, he's good with people. And then we see that. We see how he acts. We see that he does approach things with a certain level of excitement and joy. And we had not seen that before.
Right.
So. Right.
And he can let go of his daughter wanting to go to Taylor Swift. He wanted to take her to Taylor Swift. But then at the end, he lets go and he's just happy she got to go. Like he's not looking at the glass half empty. He's starting to look at the glass half full and make changes towards a more positive life.
And yeah, it's and you'd mentioned the thing with the clock, which is a lovely device that he used throughout the episode. How, you know, he's waking, and each time he wakes up, it's a little bit earlier, until he wakes up before the clock itself. It's a cute device throughout the episode, and that kind of reminds me of something I like throughout the season, which I maybe just made a glancing reference to it, but the flashback episode, there's that countdown aspect for almost all the episodes this season, as we get closer to the opening of the restaurant. Speaking of, I'm going to go to a totally different kind of an FX show from way back when. It kind of oddly reminded me of Damages. If you've ever seen Damages.
Oh, yeah.
Out there. Yeah, you've seen it. That's right. Of all things. Because I can't remember if they did it every season. I feel like they did. They definitely did in the earlier ones, the better seasons. There was always, episode to episode, there was a countdown leading up to something that we saw at the start of the season. Kind of like, here's a flash forward, and now, 7 weeks before we get there, 6 weeks before we get there. And I feel like that's kind of what this felt like. It's like, okay, we're 6 weeks from the opening. We're 2 weeks. It's like, oh my God. It's like just this little bit of pressure as we get closer. I love how as we get closer, all of a sudden the restaurant's been demolished. Like, okay, how are they going to pull this off? And I just love the tactile nature of everything we see, with the things being torn down. And the show has such a nice grittiness to it. It's really great. Yeah.
And I think it's great you mentioned that, because the clock, the ticking aspect of it, the timer and the flashback, and it's such a major device that they do even in the flashback episode.
Yes.
They do say 256 weeks or you can't put that everywhere and not see that it's intentional, that it's this countdown to the, but what I find interesting is that, the ultimate countdown, we don't get the actual open, we get Friends and Family.
Right. That's true. There's also something that's interesting rewatching some of these episodes like this one. And I believe I realized this watching it the first time around anyway, so no big revelation here, but I like how everything kind of knits together as far as Carmi's life as a chef and what he's done, and we see the connecting pieces. And we talked about it before with the Chef Luca stuff. And then we realize that, we hear him talking about his trip to Copenhagen, which we know that we saw Marcus go on, and they stayed at the same boat and fed the same invisible cat and so on. But there's something that happens in this episode, and which made me kind of go, oh, it's all connecting. That's interesting. That's very interesting. And I don't mean just that photo that Richie sees in the corridor, which is of Chef Luca and Carmi together, but it's going to confirm how there's a connection here. It's the sign that's in the kitchen. It's the thing that when he tries to call out to what was his name, Chef Terry, that she told the story of her father's journals and everything, and there was a phrase he wrote at the end of his all his entries about all these experiences and moments in life, and she didn't tell him what the phrase was, and then he's looking across the room and we realized that's what the phrase was. The phrase was every second counts. And we see that sign, we see that phrase elsewhere, and it kind of, you realize it's everything connects.
Yeah.
And you realize like her influence on this one, like you realize that she's not just probably connected to Carmi, she's connected to Chef Luca. She's all these pieces kind of come together, and you see how everyone's interwoven, and I really think that's just a nice ingenious piece of writing, and it was one of those things when I saw it again, I was going, that's right. They're all connected. And I think that's just a really special thing. Not just specific to this episode, of course, although this episode is worthy of all the huzzas that it's gotten, but just the series overall. I just want to make sure I mentioned that because it just popped into my head here.
Yeah. And it's nice throughout the episodes, even the earlier one we discussed, that you see some of the chefs in the nicer places. It's clear that his people, Carmi's people, are getting access to those places because of him. That, there's something when your people show up in Copenhagen that, you're getting in the door because your boss made that call. So that I think that he's probably gained a little more cachet with his people, that, he's not a big self-promoter. But saying go to Copenhagen and working with this guy, like when Marcus got there, he knew it was a big deal, right? And when Richie walks down the hall and you see that picture, like you didn't know that,
right?
Like Carmi didn't self-promote it, but his people have went out in the world. And, even when Sydney was going around to the restaurants and they were going to different places, the one was like, "Oh, are you working with, who are you working with?" And like, they know who Carmi is. Like, right. But I think, a positive for his character is his people find this stuff out. He's not like bragging it. They all know he's a good chef, but all these connections in this, hoity-toity world, he doesn't self-promote those. And I think but you see a lot this season. It's like the show's building up somebody you already know is awesome, but in a very subtle way.
Right. And one last thing about the episode before I bounce to the next one that I feel just occurred to me that I thought it needed to be mentioned. And we talk so much about, especially season one, where those of us who maybe are not that knowledgeable about the food and service industry, especially the restaurant industry, probably feel like we learn so much about the inner workings of kitchens and the pressures and stresses and all different things. And I can't believe we've spent over an hour and 40 whatever minutes talking, and we haven't referred to each other as chef or said please and thank you. What's wrong with us? I meant to call you chef at the end of every sentence, so I screwed up the podcast already. We're gonna have to re-record now.
It's okay, chef.
Yeah. Thank you, Chef. So I'm going to do that the rest of the podcast. So, but what I think something that really made this episode also very appealing for people, in a weird way, it's kind of like when you watch a heist film and you see how they put the heist together and all the planning and how all the little things and the things are passed on to this one and that one, whatever, and the inner workings of this restaurant, and this is supposed to be one of the a 3-star, one of the greatest restaurants there is. People wait months to get in here, and the system of notes and listening to customers and everything that happens throughout this episode, which we then see put into play later on, of course, and that's how Richie utilizes it. Which, oh, by the way, I think the lessons Richie learns in this episode that he uses in subsequent episodes also lend themselves to why people love this episode. The way Richie is, whether he's part of interviewing someone to work there, or how he's instructing people as far as watching the tables, or as you mentioned earlier, when he basically stands in for Sydney at the expo in those 5 minutes, but this is what he learned there. It makes why this episode is so important to the season and his character, but also that's why we end up loving the episode so much. Like, oh, it was so much fun and whatever, but informative and insightful, and it was important. Yeah, really good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, great stuff.
Episode 9. That's right. We're bouncing over to episode 9 because, good Lord. And episode 9 was Omelette. Hey, look, it was also directed by the creator, Storr, and written by Storr and Kahlo. Now, look, when you have an episode that's preceding what's supposed to be a big event, whatever show, it could be a mission, an election, a battle, or in the Bears' case, a restaurant opening, soft opening, family and friends, as you pointed out, you expect the preceding episode to be the calm before the storm. And in some ways, I think Omelette, it is that. I don't know if it's so much soothing as it is kind of like stress being compressed, or in some cases decompressed. It's kind of like actors rushing to the stage before the curtain rises. It's all about the people, they're finding their place or their station before, the dam breaks and the doors open and all of a sudden shit starts getting real here. So we come to this episode when we have like a somewhat frazzled Sydney. We talked about it before, but it seems to be more the case in this episode because she's fearful that failure this time around is something that she won't recover from, no matter how supportive her lovely dad is. And the fact is, we see her walking through the neighborhood, and she sees one of the restaurants that she visited during her taste test marathon back in episode 3. And that was the location where that chef even warned her about partners and so on, that they're closing. So I think that's kind of, it's just one more reminder, like, oh yeah, this venture. It's hugely risky, and these are people, they knew what they were doing, they had the experience, whatever, they thought they had ducked all those issues, and they're still closing. So it's almost like the portent of doom is kind of out there from the get-go in this episode.
Yeah, it's this is like Sydney walking, the stations of the cross, and seeing the challenges that lay ahead. And, seeing her biggest fears realized in front of her and filling her, I think, with the anxiety that manifests in episode 10, that add to that Carmi's instability with her, his unreliableness. And so like her reservoir of dread is filling up, which I think leads to her sort of, freezing in episode 10.
Right, because like her early interaction with Carmi here, it's somewhat awkward, but ultimately okay. That's why he only just now finds out that her mom has been dead for years. Hence not having a great relationship with her mom. It's kind of how she kind of bobbles and muffs that conversation with Marcus, who, by the way, Marcus, probably not the best time to even come close to asking the Queen of Stress over here for a bite, after the night is over. I think Marcus is such a genuinely good guy, but he might not necessarily be the most perceptive guy. It's not about whether she'd be interested. I was like, maybe not the best time. But it's fitting that another person who's load-bearing a bunch of stress, Sugar, she goes to a happy place due to an omelet that Sydney sweetly volunteers to make for her. And as Sydney remarks later on, that's also the one moment of calm and joy Sid gets to experience in this day, because she's in her element. She's cooking with compassion. She's, crushing sour cream and onion chips and chopped chives on a beautifully made omelet. But as she responds to Carmi later in that conversation they're having when they're trying to tighten up the table and stuff, she still loves to cook. And hey, I think it's the first time I got to use my 2023 phrase so far. At the end of the day, as long as you're doing what you love, doesn't that make up for all the other bullshit you got to deal with otherwise? And I think that's the thing that she has, that's the rim she needs to be hanging on. And I think that's kind of what the show is kind of very subtly saying with her as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's simple, but it's done for somebody with compassion, with just a moment of wanting to give somebody like comfort, like, and show somebody like you care, like just to take the time to make the food for her. And Sugar even is like, you don't have to do that. And she's like, no, it's no big deal. And in that moment, she just gets this bit of inspiration to just, crush chips or something. Cause I think later she says to Carmi, like, you know what I did that kind of worked out. And she talks about crushing the chips.
Sounds like fire.
Yeah. Yeah. But
also, just to hop on what you're saying here, think about Sugar. Someone just made her something to eat out of the pure kindness of their heart, with no expectation of compliment or overt appreciation.
Right.
They just wanted to watch you. They actually maybe would have watched you eat it and taken joy in the fact that you enjoy it.
Right.
That's what Sugar wanted from her mother, or needed from her mother, and wouldn't get. But Sydney provides it. And
it was given freely with no strings attached.
Like, exactly. Exactly.
Like she gave it to her freely with no strings attached and enjoyed it. I mean, it's like the equivalent of the hug she wanted from John Mulaney. Like in a stressful moment, like Sydney just provided her comfort and with no strings attached.
Right. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because if I'm not mistaken, this is also the episode where we see Carmi early on. I think it's probably, I'll say it's hours after having some bizarre blue-tinted sex with Claire Bear, where he experiences what first appears to be, it's like almost the beginnings of a panic attack. And you get those flashes, past and present, thundering in his head, his family, his past, images of some things we saw in the Fishes episode. And one of the things I really wanted to point out, I thought was just a nice little detail they slipped in there. We see drawings of Claire that I think are just referenced only that one time in the Fishes episode when Richie and Mike are talking about setting him up with Claire. Right. One of them, I think Richie, mentions how he used to draw pictures of her back in high school. It's almost like a throwaway line that you might not hear in the confusion of the chaos of everything, because he's yelling at them, whatever. But when you see it, and I don't even know if one of them might even be on loose leaf paper for all I know, but it's got, there's the drawings. It's almost like a nearly subliminal callback that, again, viewers might have missed, but it really hits you if you want on the second viewing. But with Carmi, he's got his major issues in this episode. Not the least of which, he has that unvoiced but clear thought, at this point, that he can't manage having someone in his life and the restaurant at the same time. And and of course we see how that comes to its disastrous end in the cooler in the in the final episode. Now I gotta say, I gotta take Carmi aside here. I gotta put my hand on his shoulder here. Like, dude, I'm not sure this is true. I mean, if there couldn't be a way to simply scale things back with a woman who literally works in an ER, she knows a little something about stress and deals with time management issues all the time. Since I know this podcast is probably going to be like 98.9% superlative about the bear, I will ring one of the very few slightly not so positive notes about the season. My opinion, at least. One of the very, very, very few flaws of this whole season is some of the issues with Claire. Now, look, I don't mean the actress. I think, and the character, she seems lovely. Her interactions with Carm, they're very clever. At times, they have humor, or there's poignancy, and so on. But she doesn't... All right. I'm going to use a word. Buckle up, fans of Australian Survivor. I apologize. I'm finally getting a chance to say it. She doesn't get much agency on her own. She seems to exist solely as this possible either extension or obstacle for Carmi. And it made me I wished we had maybe another, 10 to 15 minutes in the season to flesh her out a bit more and not have it feel like her existence is simply all about and predicated on Carmi from high school to now. Now, most of the episodes of the season, pretty short. One could have added a few scenes here or there to 2 or 3 of the episodes and could have accomplished this. Again, it's not, I think she's, a lovely character and so on. I keep using the word lovely tonight. That's weird. But I kept thinking, I kind of wish they did a little bit more with her just so I felt like she functioned outside of the carminess of it all. I don't know if you know what I mean? So again, it's literally one of maybe 2 issues I had with the entire season. And upon my rewatching these episodes, the other issue I had, I think I'm like, maybe it's not really such an issue, which is more I feel they didn't do enough with Abraham, the guy who who decided not to go to the Culinary Institute, and they kind of just don't really play in it. I mean, we got a couple good scenes with him and Tina later on. I was like, okay, I guess that's fine.
That was my main criticism, was I thought both Tina and him could have had a little more, and I would have liked to have known a lot more about him. Like, why did he not believe? Why did he disappear? Why did he have the issues that he did? I mean, they touch on them, but I felt like there was more there. The Tina thing, it's interesting you mentioned the Tina thing. The reason why the Tina thing doesn't bother me, here's why that doesn't bother me. That I thought Tina was just right this season. Because Tina had the big character overhaul change arc in season 1. Tina went from being the most, possibly the most negative, aggressive, everything character in season 1, and she transforms over the course of that season from beginning to end. Here, it's like she's now moved on to, it's almost like she's moved up the ladder, and she's doing things that Tina from season 1 couldn't possibly have done. And because she's been given that chance, she's given that opportunity, and she takes it. And she goes with it. So when you have the moment, like when she does the karaoke song in the bar that time, and it's the pride she takes when she gets comments from the people at both the Culinary Institute and then when she's in the kitchen. The fact that she keeps his knife is significant. I thought, okay, there's only so many characters, you can only do so many things. I thought that was right for her. Whereas with Abraham, I thought, it's a great scene between the two of them. And that's why I started going, all right, this is a really good scene. And maybe you don't need to fill that in for me as much as I thought I wanted it. But I kind of did. I did. I agree with you.
I kind of, again, my only thing is, but at least because of, maybe it's because, he's an older actor. There's something about, and he's one of those, I just believe him as a character, period. I don't even think about it being an actor at all, whatever. I feel like I almost create the story myself and function, whatever. Again, it's still, I'm not saying that was the other issue I had, so it definitely was on my mind. I just think the Claire issue to me was a bigger issue.
I think what interests me is the life in a kitchen's not an old man's game. It's a demanding job.
Right.
And that dude's in the kitchen and he's not a spring chicken. Like, I mean, he has to have some resilience and some toughness. So I want to know more about him. Like,
I agree. I agree. Well, we always talk about certain shows, and, you know, if a show leaves you wanting more, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly.
It's just in such a fine 10-episode season. No, they gave us 2 more episodes in season 1. They gave us more time. And plus, one of those episodes, again, it's an hour and change. You know, it's almost like, oh, could you just give us, you know, like between the 2 characters, you know, give us like 20-something more minutes this season.
Right.
To fill that in. Again, it's, you know, is it still like an A+ season? Yeah, pretty much. You know, it's not A++. I don't know. Let me dip back into the episode because we got to finish with something before we get to the finale here. I already mentioned the painting, so I can skip right over that. Now, remember at the top of the podcast, I raved about Uncle Jimmy Cicero and how great he is all season. His scene with Carmy in this episode is no different. Even if the moral of the whole Cubs Alex Gonzalez error story, it's a little muddled. You know, it's still, hey, you know what? It's a swell little monologue he's got going there. And by the way, I counted. There are 25 versions of the word fuck in that story. So he blew past Steve Martin in that scene in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which I believe I remember being 17 times. 25 fucks, fuckers, fucking, fuck up, whatever. Oh my Lord. But love that scene. Love him in the episode. And I mentioned the scene earlier. Do I want to bring this up? All right. I'm going to give it 20 seconds and that's it. The scene when Carmy and Sydney are fixing the table. And what I liked about it, it's almost like they're rebonding, the two of them here. And I'm just going to go, shame. And you're idiots to the people out there who, especially based on that scene, if not earlier scenes, thought that these two should be shipped. No. No, you shouldn't do that. Don't do that. No. That's, no. No. You're missing the point of the scene. No, you're not shipping these two. I just want to get that out.
I agree. Their bond's something different.
Yeah, that's not that. You can't. You know, it made me angry when I put that. It's like, no, you're missing the point of. God damn it. So let's go to the final episode, episode 10, The Bear. Again, creator, directed, star, written by Kelly Galuska, who's better known for writing some of the best current animated series episodes, shows like Human Resources, Big Mouth, and BoJack Horseman. This is the episode basically when the restaurant all comes together, but Carmy falls apart. Practically, now, over the course of the season, feeding right into this episode, I kind of referenced before, like it seems like every character, every actor who portrays him has at least one, if not multiple, shining moments this season. Even when we were talking about Abraham, it's like, you would think, oh, he didn't really. Yeah, but you know what? The scene with him and Tina by the drive-thru window, that was kind of nice. That was kind of it. You know, it wasn't as showy as any of the other characters, but it was something. But I think it's the more unexpected ones, and if we'd gotten a big one with him, maybe that would be one of those, that really deserve noting more than, like I always say, the likely suspects. And this episode features, to me, the biggest one of them all. And you've mentioned him earlier. What did you call him? The lovable doofus or something?
Yeah.
Yes. Pete, played by, let's go get the actor's name in here, Chris Wataski. He gets a scene with Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, Donna Berzato, who apparently was able to bring herself to the restaurant window, but is unable to enter because she doesn't want to take away from her children's accomplishment. It's an agonizing scene. And especially for this guy, he's been portrayed. I had lovable schmuck written down here. It's kind of similar. Schmuck doofus, whatever. You know, Jewish, because, you know, 87%. It's really one of the most memorable things about the entire episode, which is not taking away from the rest of the episode. it's his performance and the way he's trying to reason with her to calm her down, to bring her inside, and ultimately it just has to agree with her. This is one time you can use the word okay around her, I guess, before you. And then it gets compounded when he goes back and he sits across from Sugar and he still has like tears in his eyes and she doesn't know and he can't say anything about it, which is probably tearing him apart. It was a total surprise for me. I thought this guy's almost just like a walk-on dude. I actually had to go look him up and see. Oh, he's actually done a lot of things. He's actually a known dude. Whatever. I didn't know that. But it again, it doesn't shock us when we see the actor playing Carmy have like an amazing, powerful scene, or even Rich, or that's why they're up there on the cast list. This guy. Never saw that coming, and I thought that's what made it, I think, so special to me.
It is, and the thing I thought was remarkable about it is he's sort of an afterthought in the holiday party.
Yep.
Like, and he never really interacts with her. Like, he comes in and they're like, don't show her the tuna casserole. That'll be 8 fishes. And that's why I sort of say he's the lovable doofus. Like, he even I think Mulaney says his heart's in the right place, or somebody says something to that effect.
So good.
He's a good dude. And I think what the subtext of it is like, he's so sad that she can't come in because like she would be proud of it and she'd be proud of her daughter. And he knows his wife wants her love so bad. And to then not only like her toxicity, like bleeds onto him, and then like she makes him promise not to tell. And it's really sad. And his reaction kind of shook me. It was surprising, but then as the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, I get it. Like he really loves Sugar, and like he really thought maybe this could be like a healing moment. Like she comes in and sees the kids are successful.
Right.
But she can't do it. She can't do it. I mean, it's all about her. And,
are they married? Are
I don't know.
Married? I don't know if they. I for some reason I just assumed they weren't, but they could be because I know she's pregnant. They might be. I don't remember if they've shown a ring. I can't remember.
Are, but
I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm just more curious. Like, wait, are they? Because
we established there's a lengthy history.
Right. Because when we know they were a thing 5 years ago,
5 years ago,
and good Lord, the big thing in that thing is when he, not realizing it, reveals that Sugar is pregnant to her mom, and she hasn't told her mom, which he didn't know that, which is kind of interesting that he didn't know that. But if she had, although part of me wants to go, oh, okay, I'm not gonna. The writing is so amazing on the show. I don't want to give them shit for anything. But don't you think if Sugar had told her mom, she would have mentioned it to Pete at some point, that she told her mom about the kid? Because that would be kind of like a big fucking thing. So why would you think that?
Maybe, but given the benefit of the doubt to this show, their relationship may be such that she tells Pete she talks to her mom, but she doesn't.
That's true. You're right.
But yeah, I agree. Great scene. And I like the conceit of this episode that we get a lot of the characters coming in for friends and family. So you get to pull in, Sydney's dad, and you get to pull in Claire, with her friend that I think it's funny too. Like the Facts wanted to bring in all those people, and they're like, no.
No, the Facts are they're so ridiculous. They're beautifully ridiculous. I agree with John Mulaney. I'd like to get a weekly update from them too. What else do we have happening in this episode? We have Marcus and Sid kind of falter to an uncomfortable moment, which is made that much more so because until that moment, Marcus is the sweetest, nicest guy. And then in that moment, he's not.
Right.
And it's clear he's just not reading. It's almost like not reading the room, to be honest. But he's not reading the situation and he's making it about himself. Like, dude, none of this has anything to do with, you ham-handedly trying to ask her out before. Shouldn't have done that, but, let it go. But I love that they rebond over firing the dude, Josh, who was smoking crack out back. And that's that guy from, I think he's from Saturday Night Live, Moffat, I can't remember his first name. Wasn't that interesting. And we talked about before, I think one of the shining moments of the entire episode, of course, is Richie, who goes from being ancillary, as he put it about himself in the Forks. He becomes the most important member of that staff that night. He saves the night. And he's, in many ways, kind of the MVP of this episode, in my opinion. And I love that little moment. I referenced it already. Unfortunately, I don't know why I said it ahead of time. I love the moment where he clearly remembered the chocolate banana story that Uncle Jimmy told his then wife at the holiday dinner. And it's just a little unexpected but moving moment. Like, that I never even occurred to me. It was just,
it's beautiful. And you see Uncle Jimmy like be genuinely touched by it.
Yeah. It's just,
And it's one of those, it's funny, like, it's one of those things like listen to your diners, like, as you're in the room, but like he's remembering that from 5 years ago.
Right. Exactly. That's very good, Brian. I didn't even put that together. I'm so stupid. All right, whatever. I'm allowed to be stupid. My podcast. All right, so what else do we have in this podcast, this episode? We have Carmi. I keep calling it the cooler because I just like saying cooler. Cause,
I like that too.
I'm a Great Escape fan, can't help it. And plus, I just like saying, so we got Carmi in the cooler. And we all knew, I'm going to start doing the podcast like Walter Winchell. And we all knew that Claire would bend up outside the door when he essentially was blowing up their relationship in a self-loathing rant. Yeah, my only problem, it wasn't really a problem, again. It's one of those things like, I know that's how they're going to do this. I know that I can see it moving that direction. It's like, okay, I'm all right with that. I'm just wondering what it is he's going to say, but I know that's what's going to happen. He's going to rant about something, not knowing she's on the other side of the door. I know that's where they're going, and whatever. It's interesting because some of what there's part of me wants to go, hey, is what he said really that bad? I mean, he's obviously upset, whatever. If you take out like one or two sentences, it's really not that bad.
I think
it's not great. It's not great.
But I'll say there's two things that pointed to other than just knowing him and thinking this will be bad. That one of the surprises is that he never makes it out of the cooler like during the service. Like that's really an interesting idea that they did that. But there's sort of two things that sort of point to him falling apart. And one is like, the episode Forks, they talk about, getting the forks right, and that leads to everything else. And Sugar had asked him, are you sure about the forks? And he said he was sure, and there weren't enough forks. Like, he got the forks wrong. And he also was supposed to call about fixing the handle, and he let that slip. And that's the very reason he gets stuck in the cooler. Like, he did it to himself.
By the way, was anyone keeping track of how many possible names the guy from who's supposed to be fixing the fridge had? I think it's at least 4.
It was a great running gag.
The last one was Terry, which was like, Terry, like the chef. We had Tony.
Yeah.
We had, I believe there was a Tom or Tommy or a Tim. They're all teenagers. But I noticed that. Like, okay, no one seems, if no one knows the name, that's probably not a great sign.
Right.
But I think the more significant thing with Carmi in the cooler Carmi, it's not, yes, obviously him unintentionally blowing up the relationship, whatever, fine, okay. It's what happens right after that. It's the fight between Carmi and Richie. Yeah. And it's interesting to watch that fight now because a previous season, we're probably totally siding with Carmi and thinking whatever. And Richie's been this kind of irritant and whatever. It's like, no, Richie is right. And then Carmy goes into this litany of shit about Richie, which is almost reminiscent of Uncle Lee going off on Mikey. You know, it's eerily similar to that. It's like we're watching this episode and there's the stresses of getting the stuff prepared and all the issues happening in the restaurant and all the craziness that happens, everything, one thing after the other. And all of a sudden it's in these last 5, 7, whatever minutes of the episode. That's when all of a sudden I didn't feel the gut punch so much with the Claire breakup quite as much. I mean, it was sad. We got it after that. We got it in the fight between the two of them. And then after that, when Carmy plays the message on his phone, that's the kick in the teeth moment with Claire. That's the one where I go, oof. Oh man. How's he not going to pull a Mikey? No, I shouldn't have said that. But
well, I liked I like that. It's like in Breaking Bad when early on you root for Walter, and you hate Hank, and at some point, I mean, not that I ever loved Hank, but at some point you're like, I don't know, man, Hank's kind of right. Walter's kind of becoming, not the best guy, and there's this flip that you're on Richie's side in that fight, and the funny thing is Richie's saying positive things to him. Like,
he is,
like it's not a fight like where he's calling him a piece of shit. He's like, what are you doing, man? Like she's a great girl. Like, why do you do this to yourself? Like it's not like he's not saying you're terrible. And so unlike the Lee, Michael fight, it's like Carmy can't even take in like, Richie telling him like to be better, like that he deserves. He even says like you deserve better.
Does he not say what in the midst of their fight before he just loses it completely? Does not Richie repeat "I fucking love you" a couple times?
Yeah, like Michael and him in the pantry.
Yeah. Oh. I love the construction of that earlier scene because I love how you can have so much poignancy and it's all filtered around a lot of use of profanity.
Right. And it's another beautiful, sort of thing it picks up on it. I thought it was a great ending because it ends like in this total, chaos, where Richie's the one that held it all together, and like this is just friends and family night. So where does season 3 go? Who knows? But I thought it was a really, really curious choice to end there, and made me really interested to see what happens in season 3. But
yeah, I mean the only other things I just want to throw out really quick, and then I can move on. This was the episode where I mentioned earlier when Sid is out and doing, and as she told us she was going to, so there shouldn't be a surprise when Sid was like, oh, she's going to go throw up for a while, whatever. Yeah. It's when her dad says it's the thing. I thought that was just a great little moment there. We do have the every second counts comes back at the end as well, and that's kind of a thing. And there is one more thing. But one more bummer thing that happens. I mean, that makes that everyone with half a heart would go, oh man. It's when we realize Marcus hasn't seen all the missed calls and messages on his phone that undoubtedly mean that his mother has passed away. Right. And it's like showing how even in the midst of all this, not counting Carmy's breakup and the cooler, because everything else was a success, that then something like this can happen. So right. But I mean, I think that goes to the what you're saying, and the themes that run through this. The show's consistent about, and I think Will Poulter sort of said it in the Copenhagen. Like, if you're going to do this, like, you got to do it. Like there's no half-assing it or whatever. And like when you're in that environment, that's the thing, and that's it. Like, you don't take a call from your parents. You don't step out back to smoke meth or crack or what. Like
the all-consuming commitment to this work while you're doing it.
I don't know if it was Poulter so much, but I know Uncle Jimmy says that to him in that conversation, that he has to do it all. That's the conversation that ends with the great when. It's so good. Again, I other than one more section, one more aspect of the whole show I want to talk about. I started by talking about Oliver Platt and the Uncle Jimmy character. I left this one a little bit out, so I'll mention it now because it kind of came true to a certain extent, or it resonated with Carmy in not the best way, perhaps. When Carmy reveals them towards the end of their conversation, they actually is seeing somebody, has a girl, whatever, and Uncle Jimmy is happy for him. It's great, amazing news. But his one thing he has to say, but also, uh-oh.
Yeah.
The uh-oh is beautiful, by the way. It's just,
It says so much.
There's never, only recently did I become aware, because Mr. Supposedly Smart is actually pretty stupid more often than not. I didn't know until the last few months that when you do that thing when you kind of go, mwah, with your hand and whatever.
It's called a chef's kiss.
It's called a chef's kiss. There's never been a show more appropriate of a chef's kiss than this one, Chef. So
yes, Chef. I agree, Chef.
So, Chef, this is usually something that you would kind of do. I think you've done something like this on a couple of our other podcasts. I don't remember what shows we talked about. We don't need to be counted because we're already at 18 hours again. But I wanted to cite a few things, and I'm actually going to go to a couple, and at least 2 times I'm going to go to a specific moment on an episode. And I was going to put in a little sound effect here. I'm too tired, so I was going to reuse the record scratch that I used on the Scott Forgot the 80s thing earlier this week. I'm not going to do it, but I want to talk about some of my favorite major needle drops for season 2. And the first one is the big one. I'm not saying it's the best one, but I can make that case. I'm not saying it is. But it's the most oft-repeated one. And me being a big fan of the band and knowing the song extremely well, I was kind of like, oh, Strange Currencies by REM, which is from their album Monster back from 1994, which is a very good album. It just unfortunately followed Automatic for the People, which was a chef's kiss. Perfect album. Strange Currencies is used in episodes 2, 5, and 9. So we get to hear it not once, not twice. It's 3 times. It's very much seems to be a Carmy song. And I will talk about that a bit later, why that is, because I want to tie that to something else that's at the very end of the series. Other songs I thought were interesting, the use of, I like them using Goodbye Girl by Squeeze. Mm-hmm. And that was in episode 3, the taste test episode. I forget the title of it. Sundae. You know why I liked it? Because when I think Squeeze, there's usually like 2 or 3 obvious go-to songs. Muscles from a Shell, which would have been funny in a cooking show. Black Coffee in Bed, could have worked that one in too. Then there's the other one. I just forgot drawing it. You know the one I'm talking about. When they go to the airport and all the other crap, whatever. It's the one I actually sing, and I can't remember the title all of a sudden. I like that they picked a song that wasn't the obvious choice, but it was immediately recognized. Oh, it's Squeeze. Oh, by the way, now I know I've read somewhere more and more people are using the subtitle or closed captioning function when they watch TV or shows. And I applaud that. I am all for it. If you don't, I strongly encourage when you watch a show like The Bear to put that on, because they will identify all the songs and pieces of music used and even have the lyrics, which can play a part in the show. Like I didn't put it here. Like they use an instrumental part of a 9 Inch Nails song in an episode. I'm a 9 Inch Nails fan. I don't think I would have known or recognized that. And it made me go back and listen to the entire track. I was like, Anyway, one of my favorite funny uses is because I didn't expect to hear it in a show like this. In the Copenhagen-based episode, we get to hear Holiday Road.
Oh, yeah.
The Lindsey Buckingham song from, we all know from Vacation. That was amazing. And how can you have an episode that has that song, which is a silly movie song, whatever. And you also get I've Been Loving You Too Long to Stop Now by Otis Redding. And it's a lot of that is played. It's just such an agonizing, great track. And I wouldn't have put Otis Redding together with Images of Copenhagen, but it really kind of moves really nicely. Sometimes I like to do thematic things on the show. I noticed that like episode 5 opened and ended with different songs by the Replacements, who have a very distinct sound to them, and if you're not familiar with the Replacements, YouTube or whatever, Spotify, they open with Bastards of Young, they end with Can't Hardly Wait. I was going, I never thought I would hear 2 Replacement songs in one show. That's really something. And then we have the one that I don't know if I would have known as clearly, if not for a few months ago, based on that other podcast I did, the Scott Forgot the 80s one, where a few months ago I finally watched and did a podcast about Pretty in Pink. Well, they use Pretty in Pink, the psychedelic first song, and they use it in the moment where Carmy and Claire go to the house party. And of course, there's a scene in Pretty in Pink where she goes to a house party, which she really shouldn't have gone to. It's like, oh, why would you invite her to this? Whatever. So I thought that's a little on the nose there, but I'll go in. It's fine. Obviously the Taylor Swift stuff in Forks. I mean, I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but Richie singing along with it and rocking out to Taylor Swift is hysterical. The most triumphant use of music in the entire season, when they bring back Animal by Pearl Jam in the final episode. It's a musical callback to the use of that Pearl Jam song. And by the way, that great Pearl Jam song. Back in season 1. That's the song they closed the very first episode with. And they did that. And I always felt in that very first episode of the show, we're making a statement with this song and just dropping it like that. It's like, it's such a great, brutal, brief little Pearl Jam song. So when Richie takes over at the expo, the clock is at the 5 minutes and counting. When it's in the way they do it, where Sid says drive and Richie starts doing his thing and the music starts, it's like, it's as rousing as like if you were a kid seeing one of the Rocky movies in the theater and they start playing the Rocky music when he's beating the hell out of somebody. It's like, it's great.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, now I'm going to hook back to the Strange Currency thing. The season ends with a return to REM. Instead of Strange Currencies, they end with Half a World Away. That's from Out of Time, the album that obviously had Losing My Religion and so on and so forth. Another great album. Now, it's interesting when I look at the use of these songs, because Strange Currencies, lyrically, it's kind of about, it's like pleading, needing to prove a person's love for another, stubbornly to the point of near obsession. And so that's kind of reflective of Carmy during the course of the season. Half a World Away is about moving on from past losses, being able to cope and live alone after the mistakes one has made, which is what happens at the end of the season. That you've lost, you've lost it. He's lost, It was just such an and again, it's a really, I really like that song a lot. I was one of those. I don't know if I don't think I've actually listened to that song in probably years. It, again, made me want to go on and I just sat and just listened to it at home. I just love the framing of the use of the REM songs for this season and the fact that it really was just an additional way of telling the story of the season, at least, and especially of Carmy's character. But you could also look at some of the loss that others might have be dealing with for that song at the end of it. But I think it's more about Carmy than anything else, quite frankly. But I just really thought that was impressive. And yes, there was like probably 50 other things I could have mentioned that got played this season. But, I figured, well, by the time we hit the 2.5 hour mark, how much music can I mention? Especially because I can't play any of the music because, licensing issues. So, but I thought you'd like that.
Oh, I love it. I mean, you hit most of the points I would. I would just add to it. The playlist for this season, if you go look at it, is 63 songs.
Jesus.
That they licensed. And one you didn't mention that I love that I would have never thought I would see in a show like this. And it was in one of the late promotional videos. But I love that they used AC/DC, if you want blood.
Oh, yeah, they ended the episode with that one. Yeah.
I love that. If you want blood, you got it. Thought that was great. I mean, looking through the list, if you just look through the list, Brian Wilson, they used Vegetables, the Pixies, Valoria, Liz Phair, as you said, Nine Inch Nails. They even threw in a band I've seen live, and like they threw in a Decemberists song.
Oh, Decemberists. Okay. Yeah.
The Decemberists were in there. They used David Byrne. They used 2 or 3 Steve Earle songs.
Yep.
From the nostalgia, you had Crowded House, Something So Strong. And I like that. I love, because I thought it set the tone, I love that for one of their Christmas songs, they used the Ramones for the Christmas song during the flashback episode.
Oh, yeah. I Don't Want to Fight Tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, I Don't Want to Fight Tonight. Like how perfect was that? I mean, but you had George Harrison, Elvis Costello. The Replacements are one of my favorites. I got to see them live one time, and I'm forever grateful that I did. But just the music selection of this season really worked, and I can't even imagine what they paid for it. It's less than it used to be, but they really got heavy hitters, and I'm sure even if they didn't pay much for a replacement song, getting a Taylor Swift song wasn't cheap,
right?
So, but
it helps being as critically acclaimed as a show is, because then people want to be part of that.
Right, exactly.
And also it's become, especially with the Stranger Things phenomenon that happened last
Kate
year,
Bush.
whatever, with Kate Bush, and to a lesser extent even with the Metallica song, whatever.
Yeah.
And hell, you can go all the way back in time to the Journey song at the end of The Sopranos, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Or the Nirvana song with the Batman movie, whatever.
Something in the way.
It's a potential revenue stream beyond the licensing fee, because people start downloading it, and that's how they access it. So,
and it makes me so happy it was for REM, because I think REM was like one of my favorite bands in high school.
Yep.
And they weren't for the cool kids. They weren't for the, I saw them live on the first date of the Green World Tour. They played in Louisville, and I drove by myself because none of my friends in college liked them. I drove by myself to Louisville and watched them with Robin Hitchcock and the Egyptians opening, which made me fall in love with this weird Englishman named Robin Hitchcock. But it's so great. And I noticed if you go to their music page, REM released Strange Currencies as a single on June 23rd. So
of course they did.
So I hope they get some revenue out of it, because I love that band, love those guys. But, the only thing I would say about this show is as much as I was surprised by and loved season 1, I'm going to agree with you. Season 2 was better, and which blew me away. I was moved at various times.
I never expected the second season to be better than the first one. I thought the first one was just nicely perfect. I was like, okay, I'm sure it was going to be good. I didn't think. Because we don't often see that, but it happens.
No,
it happens. Hey, we both know shows. The second season of Justified is better than the first season of Justified, and so on, and millions of other examples. But yeah,
a show this good, the second season, you hope, is as good as the first.
Right.
You never anticipate it will. I think it did all the things it did well in season 1, and it did those things again, but played new rhythms. And, and I thought that was possible, because there was the one episode where they went and catered Jimmy's party.
Yes.
That was sort of away from the restaurant. So you did see there was potential there to branch out a little bit and still tell an interesting story. But to sort of zoom in on Marcus and Tina, and zoom in on Richie, and then do what they did, I thought it was fascinating.
And plus, we have a habit of being big fans of shows where quite often the subsequent seasons are better than the earlier ones. Be it the second better than the first. Season 2 of Breaking Bad's better than season 1, or Better Call Saul, I would say the same thing, quite frankly. Yeah. And so on and so forth. One last thing. Because I mentioned it a few times, we should, even if we only want to spend a minute on this, if at all, that aforementioned debate, the episode. Okay, let's assume it's between those two episodes. I think that's a safe assumption. As much as I think like the other four that we talked about this episode, the finale is great. I love the Copenhagen episode, Sydney taste it, whatever. But I get to use it twice. At the end of the day, it's between fishes
Chef.
and forks. Yes, chef. So, please and thank you, chef. Behind, anyway. I think I know your answer. I think you might have even already said it. So maybe I'm just confirming that I heard it before. Which one are you going with?
For me, it's 6. And it's 6 because as much as 7 unlocks this season, 6 unlocks the whole show. Like 6 is the Rosetta Stone for the whole show and tells you why all of them are the way they are. And the reason all of them are in the house, the Fex, Jimmy, is because like there's this thing in their universe that once they open the door on Mama, you get the full story for the characters that are still around. 7 unlocks the second half of season 2 and leads to a triumph both of Richie and a success in the kitchen that is triumphant. And why it's the callback with Animal is it's that's the key to that. And I love the timer. Like it made me think of like the old Battlestar Galactica episode 33. Like you set the time and like we got to be done in 5 minutes or the Cylons come and blast us. But I love that episode. So for me, it's 6 because it's the key to the whole show.
So I think the best episode was back in season 1. No, I'm just kidding. Although you could make the case for the crazy kitchen one in season 1.
Yeah.
However, yeah, I mean, I probably made it seem somewhat obvious where I was going to go the way I spoke about the 2 episodes earlier. I would also be going with episode 6. That is not to say that I do not love episode 7. I absolutely do. And to create a beautifully, perfectly constructed episode as episode 7 is a wonder. And as you know, and not to get all, but I also look at things not just as a viewer or a podcaster. I'm also the writer in me, and I can kind of visualize and see how an episode is put together, and I can very clearly see how that one was structured, whatever. But that's what made episode 6 that much more impressive to me. Because I felt that's a very difficult episode to pull off. It's the what's the phrase? It's the spinning plates kind of an episode. There's a lot of
frenetic.
There's a lot of plates spinning there.
Yeah,
and yet even with that, we referred to one moment being the Richie and Tiffany upstairs moment, but there's actually a few moments. We'll use the phrase that you did, sprinkled throughout the episode that are moments of calm or moments of humor. It could be
Michelle and the Facts.
Michelle and the Facts, or Stevie and the Facts, for that matter.
Yeah.
Whatever. You do get a few moments here, just not that. And then at the reverse, all of a sudden you get moments of pure emotion, whether it be Carmy and his brother, or Carmy and cousin Michelle, because that scene is really significant because it also tells us that because she's worried about Carmy.
Yeah.
And she's saying you need to stay away. And we realize that there's a concern for his mental health. That
and
he's not.
Or maybe even sobriety.
Right. Exactly. So there's so many little pieces to that episode that kind of just flip through the entire. It's such a stupendous episode. It has to be that one. I think I gave it away when I said, 5 years from now, that might be the greatest TV episode of all time. Pretty much gave that one away. That I was going to go with that episode.
I said to somebody the other day, at the end of the year, top 10 episodes of 2023, that'll be on lists. It'd be crazy if it's not. And the moment when you were saying that, I thought of when I earlier said like cousin Jim or Uncle Jimmy, like the way he handles the job with Richie, with Tiffany, like that's played so against type.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And she's so happy, and you can tell like he genuinely likes her, and he's happy for Richie,
right.
and then he gives him the wink, like it is just beautiful. There's so much that happens in that episode. I understand how someone might be so discomforted by it. It's not their favorite. I'm not pissed at somebody who says they like 7 better. They're wrong in my mind. But 6 is a lot.
All right, I'm gonna be mean here, and I don't mean this. Okay, I'm gonna say right up front. You know what? I could do a mean analogy. I shouldn't do the mean analogy. I'll do the nice analogy. I'm going to go back to 1990. What year was that? 1994. The movies of 1994. The Best Picture nominees from 1994, if I'm not mistaken. I think I got that right. Because I'm literally pulling this out of my fucking ass right now. So you have people that are all about Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, because it was vibrant and different and edgy and funny but violent and whatever. And then you'd have, now if I was going to do the mean analogy, and I don't want to do that because I love forks. The mean analogy, well, one of the other movies was Forrest Gump. Makes you feel nice. I won't use that. That's mean. I'll go Shawshank Redemption because I love Shawshank Redemption. But Shawshank Redemption is a traditionally structured story as opposed to Pulp Fiction. It's life-affirming. It's positive by the end of it. You walk out with it. Whereas Pulp Fiction does not necessarily... You might walk out there happy and then you realize, hey, all the characters... they're all actually dead. Except for Willis, they're all dead. Not all dead, but Travolta certainly is. But you know what I'm talking about? Just the edgy, different kind of thing. And that's kind of how I'm likening this. I'll use the Shawshank's the nicer way to do it. Forrest is me being mean. Anyway.
I love that analogy because my son's named Quentin.
Oh, there you go.
That's not an accident.
So we went from we started the podcast talking about something, a reference Reservation Dogs, and now I should have been talking about Reservoir Dogs instead of Pulp Fiction. But you know what? I think we need to bring our hopefully quite bearable discussion to a close because, yeah, my gosh. But before I go through the usual wrap up, let me clue folks in on a few upcoming podcasts. Now, a few folks out there might recall either the Batman v Superman podcast done way back in the spring of 2016, or maybe you might recall the greatest TV episodes of all time installment that covered the Reigns of Castamere episode of Game of Thrones. Hopefully you remember, hopefully you watched. Wow, imagine I release a video podcast. Never going to happen. Hopefully the geekier among you have watched one of those. I said watched again. Wow. My special co-host for those two podcasts was the incredibly eloquent and knowledgeable Pat Spinagle. And I don't care if I mispronounce his name. And I've somehow managed to get Pat to come back for at least one, hopefully 2 more movie-themed episodes of the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm going to say these are tentatively scheduled because it happens and things can get postponed, canceled, and who knows. But this very week, Pat and I are planning to be talking about that adventuresome archaeologist, Indiana Jones. And we are not just going to be talking about the current film, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Hell, we are going to touch on all 5 Indiana Jones movies, all of which I have just rewatched over the last few days. Some of them I haven't seen for many years. I might have changed my opinions on some, maybe most of them, and not as predictably as I think y'all are going to think I'm going to say. One opinion might actually annoy people. I hope it does. And if Pat is up for it and he's not sickened by his Indiana Jones experience podcasting with me, the following week, fingers crossed, because he has to go see it still. It might not be in theaters by the time he gets around to it. We are going to tackle what I think, you and I maybe, that we both believe to be the unfairly maligned Flash movie. Hopefully it's not gone by theaters. Because I think he said he hadn't seen it, although I thought he had seen it. Not sure. Whatever. Definitely Indiana Jones. Hopefully The Flash, so I can actually get on the record. If for no other reason, just so I can trash all the people who had an agenda with how they watched that movie. After we pass the midpoint of July, I think sometime around, I don't know, Brian, maybe sometime after July 18th, Because around July 18th, I hear the first 2 episodes of the limited series Justified City Primeval will be released. And I think you and I have agreed that we're going to saddle up to discuss that one for sure. And as it's going to be a series, I'm pretty sure we're going to continue to cover that one throughout the summer. I do not know if we'll be discussing anything else. I've toyed with the idea of a few other shows. I think right now, at this point in time, best to keep things lean, clean, and simple. We might spend a minute like, hey, did you watch this week's, What Do They Do in the Shadows? Yes, but who wants to talk about a comedy? All right, unless it's, The Bear. So, because it's not really a comedy. Hey, you know what? What the fuck? I'm in the process of promoting future podcasts. I would also like to encourage folks, once again, to seek out my other podcasting venture, Scott Forgot the 80s. It's available everywhere that this podcast can be found. Actually, I think it's available in more places. Let's remember there's only one T in my stupid name. The real reason I'm bringing it up is not just because we just released an episode covering the movie Real Genius. If you haven't seen that flick, go rent it on Amazon Prime, then listen to the podcast. It's kind of a fun one. But later this month, maybe late July, maybe early August, it's really on me, frequent STVD co-host Jamie Joe Kelly will finally be joining me to talk about another 80s movie that I'm sure I said I wouldn't be caught dead watching. And now I'm going to have to watch it. And that film will be Adventures in Babysitting. Oh boy. Okay. Well, I came up with a stupid podcast idea. Now I got to get tortured with these movies. Well, Elizabeth Shue, just cute, I guess. Alrighty then. So, if you like this podcast, you will like hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page to join the conversation about, pretty much anything we've talked about here and anything else that's related to TV. You can bring up movies and other pop culture shit there as well. You can go to podbean.com, type in Serious TV Drama Podcast, whatever. You can find all 383 of our episodes there. But it would be really nice for any folks out there who haven't done so over the last several years, if you went to Apple Podcast, where you can rate and review our little pod, which, by the way, I think I mentioned this on another podcast. Who cares if I'm repetitive? We actually have better and higher number ratings and reviews than most other supposedly bigger podcasts. Fuck them. Anyway, I kid, they're great, but they're not. You can also follow us on Instagram. Serious TV Drama is one word. And if you're still on the Twitter and you haven't gone to Threads, because I don't have the time, we're at STVD Podcast. That's STVD as in Serious TV Drama. So please and thank you, Brian. I think you helped make every second count on this podcast. I suspect the listeners would agree as well.
Well, thank you, Chef, and good night, listeners.
Thanks to everyone for listening, and until next time, let her rip.